Good afternoon, everyone. Please be seated. Routine proceedings. Introduction of bills. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
I move, seconded by the member for Flin Flon, that the Apprenticeship and Certification Amendment Act, Apprenticeship Supervision, loi modifiant la loi sur l'apprentissage et la reconnaissance professionnelle, supervision des apprentis, be now read a first time.
It has been moved by the Honourable Member for Fort Rouge, seconded by the Honourable Member for Flin Flon, that Bill number 238, the Apprenticeship and Certification Amendment Act, be now read for the first time. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Well, I'm very happy to rise today to introduce this important bill, Bill number 238. Currently, the number of apprentices that a journey person can supervise is set by regulation. Unfortunately, the government changed those regulations to make it less safe for apprentices on the workplace. This bill will remedy that situation by making it law and return the ratio from 2-to-1 to 1-to-1. This will ensure that apprentices are safe on the job during their training period at all times, but hopefully during this economic recovery as well. I look forward to debate on Bill 238 to help keep Manitoba tradespeople safe.
Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Agreed and so ordered. Now we'll go on to committee reports. Tabling of reports. Now, ministerial statements. We have a statement from the Honourable Minister of Indigenous and Northern Relations. The required 90 minutes notice prior to routine proceedings was provided in accordance with Rule 26, Bracket 2. Would the Honourable Minister of Indigenous and Northern Relations please continue with your statement?
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. This Thursday marks 2 years since the release of the final report of the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls on June 3rd, 2019. I wish to honor the memory of women, girls, 2 LGBTQIA+ people who have been lost, and to acknowledge the pain felt by their families and their communities. I also want to acknowledge that June is Indigenous History Month. This is an opportunity for all of us to listen to the stories of Indigenous Manitobans, to learn about their accomplishments and their contributions to Canada, and to learn about the challenges and tragedies they've faced, from residential schools to the current crisis, missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. The MMIWG final report listed 231 calls for justice, which were directed to governments, to businesses, and to all Canadians. It will take action from all of us to better protect Indigenous women and girls and 2 LGBTQIA+ persons, and to advance reconciliation in Manitoba and Canada. In Manitoba, we're working closely with First Nation, Métis, and the Inuit partners to develop and implement improved protections for Manitoba's Indigenous women, girls, and 2 LGBTQIA+ people. In February 2020, Manitoba established a new Gender-Based Violence Committee Cabinet. This Cabinet Committee takes a whole-of-government approach to coordinate policies, legislation, and initiatives aimed at addressing intimate partner and sexual violence. We can see the results of this work in Budget 2021, which invested in protecting Manitobans and advancing reconciliation. I was proud to work with the Minister of Justice and the Minister responsible for the status of women to invest over $800,000 in new supports for victims and the families of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. This is one example of how government departments working together to address issues raised in the MMIWG report, and an example of the kind of coordination that was previously missing from government. This is the path we must continue on, and we will continue on, to keep making progress on protecting our fellow Manitobans. We recognize that the calls for justice call for meaningful engagement. The voices of survivors and families must be heard. We will work together with Indigenous-led organizations to develop and implement solutions that will save lives. We look forward to the establishment of regular meetings with federal, provincial, and territorial partners that specifically address MMIWG issues. This kind of intergovernment cooperation is long overdue. By combining our efforts and focusing our actions, we will build safer communities for all Indigenous women and girls, men and boys, and Two-Spirit people. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
The honourable member for St. John's.
Thursday marks 2 years since the presentation of the final report, Reclaiming Power and Place from the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls and LGBTQ2S peoples. It's important to acknowledge that the National Inquiry's final report is the culmination of over 50 years of work and struggle by MMIWG2S families and by Indigenous women across our territories. The final report comes from the courage, the trauma, the tears, the pain of MMIWG2S families, and for the fight for their loved ones, to have their loved ones recognized and honored, and to have justice for their loved ones. The existence of the National Inquiry's final report is because of MMIWG2S and Indigenous women. The final report is a living testament to the incredible strength and perseverance of MMIWG2S families and Indigenous women. The final reports include 231 calls for justice, which is essentially and basically a roadmap all laid out for governments, settlers, social service agencies, NGOs, policing institutions, healthcare providers, educators, and Indigenous communities to realize on behalf of Indigenous women and girls and Two-Spirit. It's all there. Mumaway, MKO, the MMIWG Manitoba Coalition and others are also working with the development on this national plan with our community members. And this is also being led by community women like Diane Redsky, Sandra Delaron, Hilda Anderson-Perez, just to name a few. Indigenous families and communities across our territories expect a national plan that fully commits to the calls for justice, as well as meaningful, tangible supports for MMIWG2S families. It is critical to recognize, as signatories to the National Inquiry, it is incumbent on Manitoba to act in a significant, tangible, and urgent ways in realizing the 231 calls to justice, which includes how this current PC government plans on addressing the finding of genocide. Will the PC government center the voices and expertise of MMIWG2S families and survivors in designing the way forward based on the pathways for change? What concrete steps is the PC government taking to change policies and procedures to ensure safe spaces for MMIWG2S families, Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit? As I have said many times in this House, we as Indigenous women are our own liberators. And as such, any plans this PC government has is nothing for us without us. When released, the MMIWG Manitoba Coalition will ensure families and community members in our territory are provided with culturally safe and trauma-informed opportunities to connect with one another. The Coalition will host 3 events on June 3rd, and the Coalition is calling on financial support from this PC government to increase public education and opportunities developed by and for the community through trauma-informed lens. Events will include a virtual sunrise ceremony, an education session, a review, and a virtual press conference. I know that in anticipation to Canada's release of their national plan on MMIWG families, will be anxious to hear what the national plan will include. Please know that I and all of our colleagues—
The honourable member's time is up. Is there leave to have the member continue? The honourable member for St. John's.
Please know that as the national plan is rolled out and disseminated, I, alongside our colleagues here at the NDP, stand with each and every one of MMIWG families across the territories.
The honourable member for River Heights.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I ask for leave to speak to the minister's statement.
Does the honourable member for River Heights have leave to reply to the ministerial statement? Agreed and so ordered. The honourable member for River Heights.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, the national report of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, entitled Reclaiming Power and Place, released 2 years ago, revealed the tragic and unsettling details of what had long been suspected in relation to the many missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. I join others in acknowledging these tragedies and in dedicating myself and our Liberal team to ensuring that issues raised are followed through and that the recommendations in the report, which are directed at all governments, including our provincial governments, are followed to the extent that they possibly can. As Chief Commissioner Marion Buller said in the report, it is about beautiful Indigenous people and the systemic factors that led to their losses of dignity, humanity, and in too many cases, losses of life. Indigenous women, girls, and 2SLGBTQIA people in Canada have been the targets of violence for far too long. There are many voices in the final report. Indeed, more than 2,380 people participated in the national inquiry and its truth-gathering process. The report itself insists on self-determined solutions distinctive to the needs of those most effective as right bearers, and issues 231 calls for justice from all governments. I look forward to the national plan. I also look forward to a provincial plan because many of the actions which are needed are in fact under provincial jurisdiction. The report deals with health and wellness, human security, justice, police services, attorneys, law, societies, education, child welfare, and many, many more. And many of these issues are dealt with at a provincial level, at least in part, and in many cases, to a large extent. We need a full provincial plan, and we hope that the minister will bring it forward. It is really important. This was probably one of the most extensive commissions that we have had nationally, and the ramifications at the provincial level are very large. An Ontario study of gender diverse and two-spirited Indigenous people found that 73% had experienced some form of violence due to transphobia, with 43% having experienced physical and/or sexual violence. It is time to end this violence. It is time to implement all the 231 recommendations. It is time for a full provincial plan as well as the national plan, which we are expecting shortly. Thank you. Merci. Miigwech.
Our next ministerial statement is the Honourable Minister of Conservation and Climate. The required 90 minutes notice prior to routine proceedings was provided in accordance with Rule 26(2). Would the Honourable Minister please proceed with her statement?
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I am happy to announce today that the Manitoba government hereby declares June 1st, 2021 as Environment Officer Recognition Day in Manitoba to honor the work done every day by environment officers in the province. This proclamation comes in advance of celebrations that will begin for World Environment Day. Environment officers are responsible for the delivery of provincial environmental and public health protection programs across Manitoba. They ensure Manitobans have safe drinking water, protect Manitoba's surface water by ensuring wastewater is treated and disposed of properly, and that there is compliance with a variety of other laws ranging from livestock manure management to landfills and litter. They do this through issuing licenses and permits, conducting inspections, monitoring for compliance to the laws, and taking enforcement action when needed. Additionally, and on top of their multitude of responsibilities, they continue to assist with COVID-19 public health order enforcement across the province. Enforcing legislation that is often complicated is not an easy job. Their professionalism and devotion to their jobs is always present, even in difficult times. Mr. Deputy Speaker, environment officers have not yet received recognition for the dedication and vital service they provide to Manitobans, and they deserve our thanks. To all the environment officers currently serving and who have served in the past, we acknowledge and appreciate your commitment and dedication to protecting Manitoba's environment and human health. As the Minister of Conservation and Climate, I will be providing individual letters of thanks to our environment officers to commemorate the very first Environment Officer Recognition Day in Manitoba. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
The honourable member for Wolseley.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I am very happy to put a few words on the record today in support of the important work done by Manitoba's environment officers. Environment officers work in all areas of our province, from north to south and east to west. There are multiple different classifications of environment officers, each performing their own distinct duties. Environment officers perform a wide variety of tasks. More junior EOs work under the direction of senior environment officers. They conduct or assist with routine inspections, enforcement, or monitoring projects. This designation can also be used for training and development purposes. Many EOs are involved in the implementation and delivery of environment or public health programs. They're responsible for conducting investigations and inspections, enforcement of the acts and regulations, incident response, carrying out monitoring, licensing, and assessment activities, and providing technical advice. They may also conduct monitoring and research activities in support of environmental quality studies or the development of guidelines and standards. Some senior EOs work at a supervisory level and are responsible for the planning, organizing, implementing, and reporting on the programs for an assigned district. And in addition to performing all functions of the full working level, financial management and the supervision of other EOs is also part of the role. Some officers work in land use, waste management, and energy. Others work with drinking water standards and industrial pollution enforcement. Officers do very important work to assess and license proposals under the Environment Act, such as in forestry, transportation, mining, recreation, and other sectors. Being an environment officer is an excellent career choice for young Manitobans who may be interested in helping enforce environmental standards. So today, on behalf of myself and my colleagues, I would like to thank all of Manitoba's environment officers for their ongoing dedication to protecting our environment through inspections, monitoring, and enforcement. We appreciate you and want to wish you a good and safe summer as you continue your important work. Thank you.
The honourable member for St. Boniface.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I ask for leave to respond to the ministerial statement.
Does the honourable member for St. Boniface have leave to reply to the ministerial statement? Agreed and so ordered. The honourable member for St. Boniface.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It's always an honour to recognize members of Manitoba's civil service, this time environment officers, who work hard to ensure that Manitobans are following safe practices, whether it's to protect our water, land, species at risk, and indeed health and safety. Environment officers are often placed in risky situations. In St. Boniface, they are extremely important because of the large-scale manufacturing and industrial activity in the industrial park. Many of my constituents live close to these facilities, and they've shared with me their concerns and experiences of metal flying hundreds of meters outside of some of these facilities, posing a threat because these materials have come close to moving traffic, to workplaces, and to homes. And I'm sure everyone is familiar with fires that have broken out in the St. Boniface Industrial Park over the years. The damage done in such an event has a terrible impact on everyone, because to respond properly, it requires a significant crew response. And it's our duty to always make sure we're trying to prevent accidents like the Speedway International and fires that occurred in 2018. And as members of the legislature, we must use our voices to call for the government to assist environment officers with proper resources and staffing allocations to allow them to do their jobs to the fullest extent possible. We do hope that the government will back up today's recognition with action and protect environment officers by passing recommendations made by the Manitoba Law Reform Commission 6 years ago in 2015. Again, thank you to environment officers for serving Manitobans in potentially risky and dangerous situations. We've heard many times from members of this government that safety is the government's #1 priority. I urge all members to follow through on their words with the necessary action to ensure that all Manitobans who make it to work, who go to work every day, make it home safe at the end of the everyday. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Now we'll go on to the next ministerial statement. It's the Honourable Minister for Sports, Culture and Heritage. The required 90 minutes notice prior to routine proceedings was provided in accordance with Rule 26(2). Would the Honourable Minister please proceed with her statement?
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I'm honored and proud to recognize today as the start of Pride Month. Pride is part of our global movement for everyone to come together in solidarity, raise awareness, and express support of diversity and individuality in our 2SLGBTQ+ community in our province and beyond. Pride is a celebration of identity and a call for awareness and acceptance, as well as an acknowledgement of the accomplishments of our 2SLGBTQ+ individuals throughout our history. In previous years, Pride celebrations would attract millions of participants across the globe to celebrate and support our 2SLGBTQ+ communities through parades, workshops, parties, picnics, lectures, concerts, and much more. It is also a time to acknowledge the struggles the community has faced and advocate for equality worldwide. And although we can't gather for Pride Month as we hope to this year, the celebration is as strong as ever. There are still many ways to participate in Pride this month, from learning the history of the movement to supporting an array of diverse voices, businesses, and charities. Winnipeg Pride Week this year has been postponed, but will take place virtually from September 3rd to the 12th, 2021. Organizing events such as Pride takes a tremendous amount of planning and countless volunteer hours. And I'd like to congratulate Pride Winnipeg, their organizing committee, volunteers, and sponsors for their ongoing work and dedication, especially during these challenging times. I look forward to the day when we can all gather together in person to celebrate Pride right outside our beautiful Manitoba Legislature and join to walk proudly in the parade. In the meantime, let's show our compassion and support for one another by staying apart and remember that diversity is at the heart of Manitoba's strength. Love is love. Wishing everyone a very happy Pride Month. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Union Station.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, every June we celebrate Pride Month, not only here, but in countries across the world. Pride Month is meant to celebrate and to acknowledge the 2S LGBTQIA+ community's historical and ongoing fight against discrimination in all of its forms. Pride Month's origins can be traced back to the Stonewall Uprising in New York City in June of 1969, where Black trans women of color, and queer people fought back against discriminatory police raids. Here in Manitoba, we've celebrated Pride for over 30 years. The first ever Two-Spirit powwow was during the 30th anniversary of Pride in 2017. And the creation of the Two-Spirit name, the 30th anniversary of the creation of the Two-Spirit name was celebrated just last year. Now, it's important to acknowledge that binary gender roles our society largely follows today didn't exist in many cultures before colonialism and imperialism. And for example, it's been well documented that over 150 pre-colonial Indigenous tribes in the Americas acknowledged third genders in their communities. And in pre-colonial West Africa, non-gender conforming folks were highly regarded as spiritual leaders. Other examples include the Bakla from the Philippines, Hijira in South Asia, and Sipinik in the Canadian Arctic. We still have a long way to go before we can move away from the non-inclusive and harmful gender binary and heteronormativity that is so pervasive in our society. I mean, in the early days of Pride, some people attended with bags over their heads for fear of losing their jobs. And in this chamber, there are members opposite who have actively worked against advancing the rights of 2S LGBTQIA Manitobans. Now, as members of the Two-Spirit and LGBTQIA community, the member from Wolseley and I are proud to be part of a team that works to advance the dignity and humanity of those who would otherwise be left behind by this government. And this year, the annual Pride Festival in Manitoba will occur virtually from September 3rd to 12th. And I encourage everyone to attend the events that you can and find ways to celebrate Pride Month during this month. I want to end by thanking all LGBTQIA2S peoples to let them know that they are loved and respected and that each and every one of you absolutely belong. And to all cisgender folks and those who would call themselves allies, I encourage you to find space to show support by observing, listening, educating, learning, unlearning.
The owner member's time is up. The honourable member for Tyndall Park.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I ask for leave to speak in response to the minister's statement.
Does the honourable member for Tyndall Park have leave to reply to the ministerial statement? Agreed? Agreed. So the honourable member for Tyndall Park.
Thank you again, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I'd like to start off by saying Happy Pride. Pride is very important to recognize here in Manitoba because it is a time where our two-spirit, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, non-binary, and more community celebrates the achievements and barriers that have been overcome, and as a time to raise awareness of issues that still need to be addressed as we move forward. Mr. Deputy Speaker, our province has helped the community with changes and awareness. However, there is still a lot more that needs to be done. For example, we know that acceptance of a person being trans or non-binary goes a lot further than just a gender marker on a piece of identification. We must work hard to educate all Manitobans to be accepting, understanding, and inclusive of all 2S LGBTQ+ people in our province. In addition to this, we must remain aware that different countries in the world have beliefs, laws, and systems that discriminate against or can cause potential harm to the community, including arrest, death, stoning, or an indifference to violence or other crimes by citizens or by authorities. Mr. Deputy Speaker, there are people, even in Canada, that continue to feel unsafe. We must be conscious of the need for 2S LGBTQ+ people here in Manitoba to know that diversity and acceptance are welcome, and we all have a role to play in creating safety and support in our society so everyone can live free and openly. In closing, Mr. Deputy Speaker, even though we cannot celebrate Pride in person this month, a virtual Pride is being planned from September 3rd to September 12th, with plans for events, performances, and a virtual parade. I hope that everyone will join and celebrate Pride here in Manitoba. Thank you.
Member statements. The Honourable Minister of Legislative and Public Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. As this most unusual spring session comes to an end, I want to recognize a few people. And the first, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is you. Due to the unexpected absence of Madam Speaker, you have been thrust into the full-time job of keeping MLAs in line and keeping things moving in a positive direction in this legislature. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, let me join my colleagues in saying that you have done a tremendous job. Even as we wish Madam Speaker a full recovery and look forward to welcoming her back in the fall, we thank you for your great work. I'd also like to recognize a retiring member of the media gallery. This Friday will be the last day on the news beat for Larry Cush, longtime Free Press reporter and Legislative Gallery member and president. I am sure that there are many stories that Larry wrote that I may have rolled my eyes at. And I am sure in the countless interviews that we did together, some of my answers made him roll his eyes too. But such is the nature of the relationship between media and politicians. But I'm grateful that through all these years, we could always have a friendly exchange in the hallway to talk about our kids or talk about our summers. I know that this has been a tough year for Larry, but we wish him nothing but the best in the years and the days ahead. He is a true gentleman. And finally, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I want to thank my House Leader counterparts. There are always many difficult and divided matters before the legislature, but behind the scenes, negotiations happen to make this place work. And this session was especially tricky as the number of members was adjusted a few times based on the pandemic conditions and who could be in the House. And it has been done by unanimous agreement. But in all these discussions, the member for St. John's and the member for River Heights have always put public health first and political considerations second. It is a demonstration that there is still much to be said for our democracy and those who serve within it, and I thank them both. Mr. Speaker, I wish everyone in the Assembly well during the summer, and I look forward to seeing all of you in the fall back here together. Thank you.
The honourable member for St. John's.
Deputy Speaker, let's review the Premier's greatest hits just this last sitting. Advised it doesn't bother him at all to have teachers pay for supplies out of pocket, advance the Colonial Project with Bill 56 infringing on Indigenous sovereignty, suppress the rights of peaceful protesters with Bill 57, covered up $5 billion in hydro contracts while freezing workers' wages, forcing a strike, received amnesty on his Costa Rican taxes through an application-only program. Then he said he didn't know anything about it, cut children's disability services, cut healthy baby prenatal benefit, the Healthy Baby Milk Program, and budgets for parent-child coalitions, renamed 8 wildlife management areas all after white men, disrespecting centuries of conservation work done by Indigenous peoples and women, increased the number of special permits for Churchill wildlife management areas to give extras to a conservative donor and a former federal candidate. Still no contract for nurses and healthcare professionals, cut healthcare funding below the rate of inflation for the fifth year in a row, outsourced staffing for vaccine super sites, left ICUs dangerously understaffed during the third wave, with up to 15 unfilled nursing shifts at the Grace Hospital ICU and a 21% vacancy rate for nurses across the Perry Mountain Health Region, and left home care vacancies increase up to 26%. Sent citizens to Ontario to access critical care, wanted to send teachers to North Dakota to get vaccines, blamed Biden, blamed Manitobans, blamed ICU patients. Deputy Speaker, these lists aren't fun. These are real Manitobans dealing with the consequences of that man over there. I, for one, hope that this is the last time I have to get up in the chamber and do the Premier's greatest hits. Miigwech.
The honourable member for Radisson.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Today I want to speak about a weighty matter, a very weighty matter indeed. In fact, it clocks in at 394,160 pounds. I'm speaking, of course, of the steam locomotive engine CN2747 located on Plessis Avenue, just north of Transcona Boulevard. This beautiful engine is part of the collection of the Transcona Museum. I like to joke with the member for Transcona that while his constituency has a greater number of museum's artifacts in it, Radisson constituency has the most by weight. Now, the community of Transcona was built because of the railway shops, so the very first locomotive engine it ever built rightfully holds a special place in our community. This significant part of Transcona's history deserves to be preserved. Now, thankfully, many volunteers and professionals supported by donors and grants, including from our provincial government, have already made significant strides in making it bright, shiny, and durable once again. Now, government and community members are stepping up with efforts to build a $493,000 enclosure over and around the engine to protect it from the elements, increase security, and provide more opportunities for the public to see, interact, and appreciate the engine. The Minister of Sport, Culture, and Heritage and myself have already helped kick off the campaign, the capital campaign, with a $15,000 contribution from the provincial government. And I'm hopeful that additional grants will flow from provincial, federal, and municipal governments. Government grants alone will not be enough. Businesses, individuals, and community organizations will also need to get on board and make this plan a reality. Now, before my dad passed away a few years back, he donated a painting of CN2747 to the Transcona Museum. And the museum is using postcard prints of this painting to help raise funds. My parents and my own family as well have contributed to this project, and I encourage every other Manitoban to do the same. Details about how to donate to the project are available at transconamuseum.mb.ca. So I encourage all Manitobans to get on board and to ensure this important reminder of Transcona's history remains visible and present in our community for generations to come. Thank you.
The honourable member for Union Station.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, throughout this pandemic, we've seen the Premier put false statements on the record, misrepresent the facts in the media, and do everything he can to distract from his failings as a Premier. And during this health crisis of our lifetime, not a single member of the PC caucus has stood up for Manitobans and done what's needed to ensure that everyone gets through this time. But do you know who has? The very Manitobans we're elected to represent and serve. While the member for Radisson doesn't think we should feed hungry children, the Mutual Aid Society, Food for All, Community 204, and Union Station businesses have provided hampers and healthy meals to thousands of community members in need. While the Premier sows racist seeds of division and the Minister of Health brings forward anti-Indigenous legislation with Bill 56, the First Nations Pandemic Response Team exemplify compassionate leadership during a collective time of need, and communities lovingly share their vaccines. While all three, former, current, and acting, failed ministers of health attack doctors, have no plan for nurses, and gaslight frontline workers, our healthcare heroes work double and triple shifts to keep Manitobans alive and provide care by the bedside. And the Minister of Education wants to suppress democracy in schools and silence local voices with Bill 64. We see teachers, staff, parents, and students lining their lawns and apartment windows with NDP signs and organizing against him and his out-of-touch government. I send care and thanks to all Union Station constituents and Manitoba residents. Know that although we rise from the House today, we're going to continue fighting just as hard for you to make sure that you have access to vaccines, supports for your businesses, resources in healthcare, education, and for your families and all of our communities. Miigwech.
The honourable member for St. Boniface.
Merci, Monsieur le Vice-président. Je tiens à souligner ceux qui ont gagné le prix réel 2021. Depuis 1983, la Société de la francophonie manitobaine rend hommage à des francophones du Manitoba qui, de façon remarquable, ont contribué, surtout bénévolement, au développement de la collectivité, tout en suscitant chez les nôtres le goût de vivre en français. La remise du prix virtuel a eu lieu le jeudi 20 mai sur les comptes Facebook et YouTube de la SFM. Les gagnants sont, pour développement communautaire, Crystal Desrosiers. Crystal Desrosiers a fait preuve d'un dévouement exceptionnel en tant que bénévole pendant 20 ans au sein de l'Union nationale métisse Saint-Joseph du Manitoba. Pour le patrimoine, Doris Lemoine. Passionné du patrimoine et de l'histoire, Doris Lemoine est bénévolée à la maison Gabriel Roy depuis sa création en 1995. Pour les communications, Marc Marion, cet avocat très engagé, a été nommé pour son travail bénévole au sein du CA du Presse Ouest Limité, la société éditrice du journal La Liberté, dont il est le président depuis 2013. Et pour la politique, Justin Johnson, il est chef de direction à l'Association des municipalités bilingues du Manitoba, AMBM. Justin Johnson attribue à son passage au Conseil jeunesse provincial le mérite de l'avoir motivé à s'engager dans la communauté. Félicitations. I did want to mention, I discovered in a newspaper clipping that my grandfather, J.S. Lamont, and Justin Johnson's grandfather met together 84 years ago in 1937 when a medal featuring Louis Rail was presented to a Métis couple on their 50th wedding anniversary. There's a real joy to finding these old connections. And since this is the last day before we break, I want to thank the speaker, his clerk, staff, and other members. There's a saying that even a stopped clock can be right twice a day, so I hope people will remember that even I can be right twice a day. And I also want to wish the very best to Larry Cush, who will be retiring shortly. I've always appreciated his no-nonsense, calm demeanor, his dedication to his profession, and the fact that he pretended to laugh at my jokes. Well played, Mr. Cush. It's been a very difficult year for him, and on behalf of my colleagues and myself, best to you for a very well-earned retirement. Merci. Miigwech. Thank you.
Prior to our questions, I have a statement for the House. 4 of our pages are serving their last day in the chamber, and I want to share a comments with the House. First comments are from Maggie Roger. I am in 11th grade of Oak Park High School. I will be graduating from June 2022, and I'm hoping to continue my education with a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology at Dalhousie University. Being at Page in this past year has given me the heightened respect and gratitude, not only for our MLAs, but for everyone in the sidelines making this process possible. Seeing at person the legislative process and details our democratic system has been insightful and inspiring. It has cemented in my interest in politics and current events. Working with the legislature during the pandemic, when the responsibilities of governments were so crucial to people of Manitoba, was a once-in-a-lifetime experience, hopefully. That being said, I'm very happy that I've been vaccinated on May 27th, and I am anxious for life to return to somewhat normal state. I am extremely grateful for the opportunity to support all of you and to get to know you a little bit this past year. It was a privilege, and is this year I will never forget. Next, comments from Rufan Lin. Experiencing my entire senior year in the midst of this pandemic was tough, but I appreciate myself and my class of 2021 for getting me through it together. I'm graduating from Fort Richmond Collegiate and entering the Faculty of Arts and Science at the University of Toronto with a focus on social science. I hope to pursue a career in law, applying what I have learned here at the Manitoba Legislature. So all the best there. Being the page for the Legislative Assembly was definitely one of the highlights of my year, and I cannot believe it's ending so soon. Working with other pages, Dave, Ray, Cam, MLAs, and other legislative staff have been an opportunity of a lifetime. With the now newfound experiences acknowledged, I will continue helping people with developmental disabilities while sharing my passion for art and writing with new people I meet. Thank you for a wonderful year, and stay safe and healthy. Next comments are from Jordan Glaspie. I really enjoy the time here at the Legislature, Manitoba Legislature. It was one of the best experiences of my life. I really enjoy learning about the legislative process, meeting the MLAs, and getting to know the staff. My favorite memory from the year here is definitely the night that I called over 10 votes. This experience has been enjoyable, and I hope to see you all again. Last comments from Taryn Klippenstein. I am grateful for the opportunity to work as a page in the PAGE program. It gave me an insight of our political system, and I would not have otherwise experienced. Next year, I will be attending the University of Winnipeg and explore faculties and programs offered courses focusing on social issues and needs. Because of my experience in the program, I have decided to pursue an education and career in helping people. Maggie, Rufan, Jordan, and Taryn, on behalf of the Manitoba Legislature, I wish you all the best in your future endeavors. And it has been a delight to have you all here working and get to know you. And with your abilities to do the votes in 10 or more sometimes a night, it was extremely impressive. So all the best from all the MLAs, the clerk staff, and all the legislative staff. I wish you all the best. Thank you. Now for oral questions. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Well, let me say to Maggie, Rufan, Jordan, and Taryn that we certainly appreciate all your hard work here. I hope that it's been a meaningful learning experience and that you'll take some of the positives that happen here forward with you, and all the best in what's next. So thank you so much. In March of 2020, Manitoba faced a challenge like no other, the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, Manitoba did not have the numbers that were as severe as in other provinces during that first wave. It was the hard work of Manitobans that gave this province time and space to plan ahead to address the challenges that we saw in other parts of Canada. But did we prepare? No. Did we plan ahead? No, this government did not. We now have some of the worst outcomes of anywhere in Canada. Why did the Premier squander the head start that Manitobans gave him after the first wave?
The Honourable First Minister.
Maggie, to you, and to also to Rufan and Jordan and Taryn, I wish you all the very, very best on behalf of our government. In your all your endeavors, not exclusively your academic ones, but of course we're excited to hear that you're pursuing your education and that you're going to be going forward to career development paths that you're going to enjoy, I'm sure. And I hope that you take with you a valuable experience here and use it as you move forward in other ways. You've served here at a different time than any other pages have ever served, with additional stresses on you and on all those around you too. And so I hope that you've learned through that how to face challenges together and to work as part of a team as you have. And I also want to say a thank you to the rest of the team here who are serving in a time of COVID, in a time that is trying. It is undoubtedly a demanding time that we will all remember and not necessarily treasure, but I hope we can treasure the lessons we've learned about working together and preparing. Most certainly that's what this government has been focused on since the outset.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a supplementary question.
Last summer, experts warned that we needed to prepare for a second wave, but this government didn't do that. Instead, the Premier launched his ill-fated Ready, Set, Go ad campaign. At the same time, the Premier then went on to shut down the Health Incident Command Center. The Premier and his cabinet refused to hire more healthcare workers. Instead, they turned around and demanded that those jobs be cut. It was a failure of focus and a failure of leadership, and it led to great costs and hardships borne by the people of Manitoba. It meant the second wave was worse here than anywhere else in Canada. Why did the Premier fail to prepare Manitoba for the second wave?
The Honourable First Minister.
I know that the member is anxious to exploit COVID for political gain, but he should not pay disrespect to the preparatory work done by thousands of people throughout the government, the hard work that was done by people throughout our province and the private sector as well, and the volunteer sector deserves mention. And I would like to today pay special mention and again say, as I know all members of the House would agree, that we owe a special debt of gratitude to all our frontline workers in the health sector. This pandemic has placed incredible stresses on all of us, incredible stresses on families and on individuals, but also on those who serve our needs in the healthcare sector. And so do our physicians, our nurses, our respiratory therapists, our first responders, all our medical workers, and all the staff who support them in the institutional care they provide. I want to say a special thank you for working together as part of Team Manitoba throughout this entire pandemic.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a final supplementary question.
Well, then give nurses a fair deal. We all saw the tragedies happening in long-term care in Ontario and Quebec. But this Premier and this Cabinet didn't seem to learn those lessons. Instead of listening or learning, the Premier's failed health minister claimed the deaths of seniors was unavoidable. Premier and his government, that same minister, they attacked doctors who tried to raise the alarm. And the Premier himself refused to call in the military even as seniors died in personal care homes. The shameful tragedy at Maples and other care homes was the result. Now, this government still hasn't learned these lessons. In the budget that they brought forward after the second wave this year, there was no new money for long-term care in Manitoba. Why did the Premier fail to protect seniors living in personal care homes?
The Honourable First Minister.
Well, again, what the pages will note is a willingness to exploit an opportunity on the part of an opposition politician, and they'll also note that it's very easy to be right in every one of your opinions when you're not on the field of play, and you're not actually the ones in charge of the decision making. That's the hard job. This is why there are no statues of critics around the world. It's easy to do. You don't have to have any expertise. You just simply look at things and then complain. And this is what the opposition does. It's part of their job, and I think defensible in some ways. However, when it goes further to disrespect our healthcare leaders, it's not defensible. When it goes further to disrespect our vaccination team, over 4,200 immunization staff, incredible, 4,200 immunization staff, vaccinating all over the province, 733,000 first doses alone to date. Think about that and think about the incredible work that those folks have done, and say thank you to them for that wonderful dedication to Team Manitoba.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a different question.
7 more intensive care unit patients transferred out of the province yesterday alone, which brings the total number to 43. Incredible indeed. Think about that. The second wave of the pandemic revealed holes in our healthcare system that were created and then made worse by this PC cabinet. Staffing shortages in the intensive care units. Not only did the Premier fail to address these challenges, this cabinet went and made things worse. There were fewer critical care nurses in Manitoba in January of 2021 than there were 2 years before. That means this cabinet saw the second wave and decided we needed even less ICU capacity after we made it through that. These are holes that this government should have filled. Why did the Premier fail to address any of the gaps in our healthcare system revealed by the second wave?
The Honourable First Minister.
Again, just piling up on the false assertions today. Sadly, the reality is that the NDP commissioned a report on ICUs and emergency rooms by Dr. David Peachy when they were in government, and then didn't adopt any of the recommendations, which we acted upon in our first 4 years of government. And luckily, this pandemic didn't happen in 2016, because we increased the number of equipped, staffed ICU beds by 40% in that first 4-year period. And now we doubled it again during COVID. This is an incredible accomplishment. Our healthcare leadership deserves credit, not criticism, for accomplishing this. I would also say thank you to our contact tracers. We have almost 1,000 contact tracers that have been working throughout this pandemic to notify folks to help protect them when they've come into contact with someone diagnosed with COVID. That's tremendously important work. Over 200,000 calls have been made by those contact tracers, and we're talking about a significant amount of effort at a stressful time by a lot of dedicated people. So I want to say a special thank you to them for being part of Team Manitoba.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a supplementary question.
1,300 nurse vacancies in Winnipeg alone. Hundreds of more nurse positions empty across the province. Brandon, Dauphin, Thompson, everywhere. These are the results of cuts that this government has made. You can measure the accuracy of these figures in the amount of patients sent out of province. The only province that has had to ship ICU patients to other jurisdictions. That's because of the cuts that were uniquely severe under Manitoba's PC government. It is a failure to serve the people of Manitoba. It's a failure to learn the lessons laid bare by the pandemic. The Premier should be accountable. Will he apologize today for cutting ICU nurses in Manitoba?
The Honourable First Minister.
Doubling the ICU capacity from the start of the pandemic and increasing it by 40% over what the NDP left behind after 2 decades of power is nothing for our healthcare leadership to apologize for. They should be proud of their actions. No one could have anticipated the needs. We're happy to be in the Confederation, happy to have offered support to others throughout our time as a province here. And now that we need assistance, I say thank you to the Government of Ontario. Thank you to the Government of Saskatchewan for offering that assistance, just as we would to them in their time of need. They are doing now. I also want to say thank you to the federal government, but I especially want to say thank you to our small business community and tell them that we know how valuable and how appreciative we are of their work, their community contributions, their creation of jobs and opportunities for summer students, for people, for full-time positions. That's why we've offered $750 million of support as a government. No province has done more for their small business population. We value you and we say thank you for being part of Team Manitoba.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a final supplementary question.
No province has failed harder at the government level than Manitoba. The cuts that this Premier and his cabinet instituted in the healthcare system are part of the reason that those small businesses were hit so hard. One lesson we've all learned during the pandemic is that a healthcare investment is an investment in the economy as well. And yet, there appear to be 30-some Manitobans who have failed to learn that lesson. They're all members of the PC caucus. This is the Premier's legacy. The worst outcomes in COVID across Canada. A failure when it comes to the COVID response. It hurt Manitobans. It made life worse in this province. Does the Premier accept responsibility for his and his government's failure to respond to the pandemic?
The Honourable First Minister.
I'm excited to accept the responsibility of leading the government that is made up of people dedicated to the service of Manitobans and that will never shirk in that responsibility. Steady, united, and focused. The member opposite hasn't had that experience, but I have. We're experiencing challenging times. We don't quit in challenging times, not here in Manitoba. We don't quit in challenging times in Manitoba because we stand up to those challenges and we face them head on. And we'll continue to face them head on, not by running away, not by lying about our record in a book, not by running on false pretenses and hiding our record from the public, not by doing any of those things. That's what a coward would do. Standing up and facing the challenges head on, that's what Manitobans do, because Manitobans aren't shamers. They see through the members' tactics. They're people who rise to the challenge, and Manitobans will rise to this one just as they have throughout their proud history. Thank you very much for your service, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
The Honourable Member for St. John's.
Indigenous families cannot heal until the full extent of a system designed to forcibly assimilate Indigenous children into Canadian society is understood. Work that all levels of government must take on. When asked about systemic racism, the Premier has said, and I quote, "Actions matter at least as much as adjectives," end quote. But this same Premier was slow to respond to the discovery of 215 Indigenous children. And when asked the Premier and the provincial government yesterday to support the investigation of all Manitoba former residential schools, they deferred to the federal government. Will this government support in all ways the efforts to investigate Manitoba's former residential schools for unmarked graves of Indigenous children?
The Honourable Minister of Indigenous and Northern Relations.
Thank you, Deputy Minister, and I thank the member opposite for the question. It has indeed been a difficult few days since we heard in the media of these 215 graves that were uncovered in BC. And I met this morning with many of our visitors out on the front of the Legislature building talking about their experiences. And some of them are residential school survivors. They talked about how this was affecting them, and we also talked about the sites in Manitoba. And it was interesting to learn where some of the additional sites are beyond the 14 that are acknowledged. And we look forward to further dialogue with these individuals and moving forward to do more on behalf of their families.
The Honourable Member for St. John's on a supplementary question.
When the member for Kiiwetinoong asked the Premier to explain how he planned to support sections 71 to 76 of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission yesterday, the Premier said to the member, and I quote, "probably has more information on this specific piece than I do," end quote. It is not the responsibility of Indigenous peoples to continue to educate over and over again that this work needs to happen. It is the responsibility of all peoples and obviously all levels of government to do this work. Deputy Speaker, it was disappointing that the Premier did not put any official words on the record yesterday when we debated our MUPI. And so, I would ask the Premier to get up today and ask to commit the resources towards investigating all former Manitoba residential schools for graves of Indigenous children.
The Honourable Minister of Indigenous and Northern Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I thank the member opposite for this discussion. The Truth and Reconciliation Calls to Action number 75 calls on the federal government to work with provincial, territorial, municipal governments, churches, Aboriginal communities, former residential school students, and current landowners to develop and implement strategies and procedures for the ongoing identification, documentation, maintenance, commemoration, and protection of residential school cemeteries or other sites at which residential school children have been buried.
The Honourable Member for St. John's on a final supplementary question.
I don't think that was an answer, and we know what that recommendation is. Provinces must do better than just deferring to the federal government on these issues. They must take this seriously and make a firm commitment to implementing all of the TRC's calls to action and work collaboratively and respectfully with Indigenous peoples and with all levels of government to investigate all of Manitoba's former residential schools. The Alberta government has announced its intention to fund research into undocumented deaths and burials of Indigenous children who were killed in residential schools. Members opposite must do the same. Words are simply not enough, Deputy Speaker. Will the Premier get up right now and commit to funding this important work and ensuring that children get back to their families? Miigwech.
The Honourable First Minister.
Ensuring the lessons that should be learned and must be relearned by all of us about the tragedy of residential schools is a critical part of our commitment to the calls to action of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I can only say to the member who was an Indigenous, acted as an Indigenous advisor, I understand, a paid Indigenous staffer, giving advice on Indigenous policy to the previous government for many, many years, that none of this happened.
Order.
And so when the member gets up and tries to score political points on this issue, that is unseemly, it's inappropriate, it's just simply shameful and wrong. And
Order.
So I'll say, I'm answering the member's question if she would be still long enough to listen.
Order.
We're committing to act where it wasn't happening when the member was in government, and we're committed to act seriously in conjunction with partnerships, leaderships in the federal level, at the Indigenous level, to make sure that these failures,
Order.
many, many years, do not continue.
The Honourable Member for Fort Garry. Order.
Manitoba small businesses are struggling during this third wave. Many business owners have continued to operate throughout the pandemic, just barely getting by. Now they've reached their limit, and the Manitoba Bridge Grant Program is not accepting any new applications. Businesses have been incurring all kinds of expenses to keep their customers and staff safe for the past 15 months. Far too many of them are ineligible for supports. Will the minister reopen the Bridge Grant Program to new applicants today?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Well, thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. We know that the member is no friend of business, trust me. What our government has done is we've invested over $657 million $671 million in supports to businesses along the way. There's been over 70,000 individual payments that have gone out to businesses. That includes 15,000 supports for businesses under the Bridge Grant Program. We've also made additional investments in the sick leave program that will benefit businesses just in the last month alone for upwards of $60 million, as well as additional supports to restaurants, some of the businesses that have been dramatically impacted by Manitobans. Our government is very much committed to support local businesses to get through the pandemic, and that's exactly what we've done.
The Honourable Member for Fort Garry on a supplementary question.
I think all you have to do is drive around downtown Winnipeg and see all the closed storefronts to get a real visual idea just how much this government and this minister respects and supports small business. Now, the Bridge Grant Program is overly complicated and it's undersubscribed. It's not giving business owners the relief that they need. It has restrictive eligibility criteria and has left too many small business owners out in the cold entirely. After 15 months, new businesses have started to spring up. However, they've been hit with the third lockdown and they're not getting any help from this government. Will the minister do the right thing and revamp and reopen Bridge Grant eligibility today?
Order. Order. The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. We know how much of a hypocrite the member opposite is, as he usually uses his class war for fair approach in tax businesses. So it's kind of ironic that he comes in to somehow support them. What this government has done is they've put more money to support businesses than most governments, and some of the most generous supports in the country. As I mentioned, just over the last number of weeks alone, we've invested over $71 million in fourth supports for the Bridge Grant Program. Over $60 million of supports for sick leave program to make sure employers and employees are supported. We've invested more than $3.6 million to support business or things like restaurants above and beyond that. All totaled over $671 million in supports. We're going to do what it takes to support business.
The Honourable Minister's time is up. The Honourable Member for Fort Garry on a final supplementary question.
You know, Mr. Deputy Speaker, Manitoba small businesses deserve support, not childish name calling. Now, the minister is leaving far too many small businesses out in the cold, and for the rest of the province, he prefers to keep them in the dark. The budget implementation bill has yet to be tabled. They began this session hiding 19 bills, and now the session's about to end, and the details of the budget have been hidden from view. In previous years, BITSA cut funding to transit and to the City of Winnipeg, and last year it included a 3% hydro rate hike. This is a government that runs away from transparency and accountability. Why is this minister hiding away this important legislation?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. We know what the Leader of the Opposition, the leader from Fort Garry, have decided to do during the pandemic. They decided to filibuster major supports for things like the pandemic when Manitoba needs it most. What did they do? They filibustered the Legislative Assembly in the last year for close to 1/3 of the session. It quite frankly is shameful activity. We ministers, as well as the Premier, have been out daily in terms of briefing people in terms of what needs to happen for the pandemic to make sure we're protecting Manitobans. Our last budget provided $1.1 billion of supports to protect Manitobans and make sure we're advancing Manitoba past this pandemic to get businesses back on the road to recovery.
The Honourable Member for St. James.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I recently shared the experience of a community member whose 93-year-old mother was left in the Grace ER hallway for a total of 5 nights in a row. This story touched many people in West Winnipeg, and others have since reached out to share their own stories. What's become clear is that the Grace ER is in a state of crisis. Patients are being left to sleep in hallways, many are not receiving their medications on time, and there are issues with severe overcrowding and understaffing. The minister needs to intervene to protect staff and patients. What is the minister doing to address the crisis happening in the Grace Hospital ER today?
The Honourable Deputy Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Each and every day, our healthcare workers are dealing with an unprecedented, historic challenge, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and they're doing so under difficult circumstances, under trying circumstances, but they are doing so in a way that I think all Manitobans should be proud. We know that these are challenging times for all of those who are in the healthcare system. We also know that they're stepping up and doing the job that not only they were trained to do, but we know that they love to do, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Regardless of the hospital that they're in, despite the challenges that they're facing, we also know that we will be better on the other side of this, Mr. Deputy Speaker, because that is how Manitobans react to a crisis. They step up, they do what needs to be done, and they improve after that, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
The Honourable Member for St. James on a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. They are dealing with an incredibly difficult situation that's been made infinitely worse by the cuts that have been made by this government. Mr. Deputy Speaker, during the third wave of the pandemic, Manitobans want to know and trust that our hospitals are the safest place they could go. The Palliser government's own wait times task force warned them that consolidation would put real pressure on remaining emergency rooms such as Grace, but they did not listen to calls for more capacity. The result is a deteriorating situation with backed up patient flow and a lower quality of care. What steps is the minister taking to address the long-term staffing crisis at the Grace Hospital today?
The Honourable Deputy Premier.
In fact, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the very report that the NDP commissioned outlined the fact that there were historic wait times in Manitoba, more than any other province in Canada. Those wait times are reduced by the measures that were taken by this government in terms of investment. Not only are there $750 million more annually that are invested through operations in the healthcare system, Mr. Deputy Speaker, but a new emergency room was open at the Grace. There's been new capital investments in St. Boniface. There's new capital investments in Flin Flon and all places around Manitoba where the NDP spent their time closing ERs. We are opening and staffing emergency rooms, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
The Honourable Member for St. James on a final supplementary question. Order.
Thank you. The Grace is effectively a community hospital that has been thrown into the deep end without the necessary investments to support tertiary care. That's what the Wait Times Task Force warned this government. Now, predictably and unfortunately, the Grace Hospital is overwhelmed. The Palliser government's rushed consolidation is having a real and negative impact on those seeking care in my community. Why isn't the minister taking action to solve these issues immediately?
The Honourable Deputy Premier.
Well, there's no question, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that the pandemic is having an impact when it comes to care, Mr. Deputy Speaker, but those care providers have stepped up in remarkable ways, Mr. Deputy Speaker, not only in the hospitals, but ensuring that new vaccines, which didn't even exist a year ago, Mr. Deputy Speaker, are being distributed throughout the province. Thousands of individuals have joined that team to distribute vaccinations. More than 870,000 doses have been administered in the province just in the last few months. Mr. Deputy Speaker, that is the hope that's being provided to the entire healthcare system, to Manitobans. I know that that member is trying to raise these issues, either try to scare people or to fearmonger, Mr. Deputy Speaker. There are real challenges, but there's also real hope. I hope he sees that hope and demonstrates it, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
The honourable member for Point Douglas.
The moment a Manitoban struggling with addictions makes a decision to seek help, they need immediate access to supports in order to make a change. That moment doesn't necessarily happen on weekdays or during business hours. I'll table a document for this House which shows that in the past 4 months, RAM clinics have only been open an average of 1.8 hours a day. This is simply not enough to meet the need for immediate accessible care to fight their addiction. Will the minister commit today to funding clinics and organizations who are ready to do this work so they can support Manitobans battling addictions around the clock? Or does the minister think that 1.8 hours a day is adequate support?
The Honourable Minister of Mental Health, Wellness and Recovery.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I would like to thank the member for Point Douglas for her question. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I was so pleased to announce yesterday more than $819,000 being invested by our government to expand capacity at our 2 Winnipeg RAM clinics. And I also want to just thank all the physicians and healthcare staff that work at not just the Winnipeg clinics, but all our RAM clinics across the province for the tremendous work that they're doing during this difficult time to support individuals that are struggling with mental health and addictions and substance use. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I hope the member opposite will join me in thanking those healthcare professionals as well.
The honourable member for Point Douglas on a supplementary question.
The Virgo report called for greatly enhanced funding for addiction supports. The minister is talking about a drop in the ocean of what is needed. 372, and I'll repeat that number, 372 people lost their lives this past year because they couldn't access the resources and supports they needed. To make matters worse, families trying to desperately get their loved ones' care are facing long waits because there are less detox and medically assisted treatment beds since this government came to power. Will the minister commit to reversing her government's cuts and to opening more detox and medically assisted treatment beds, or will she continue to use the pandemic as a human shield for failing to do her job?
The Honourable Minister of Mental Health, Wellness and Recovery.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And I do want to say it's unfortunate that the member for Point Douglas continues to rise in the House and put inaccurate information on the record, disrespecting the healthcare workers and all the fine individuals that are working during this difficult time to provide services to individuals that are struggling. Mr. Deputy Speaker, since the Virgo report was released in 2018, our government has invested $50 million in 33 initiatives, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And I would like the member for Point Douglas to apologize to all the RAM Clinic individuals that work every day for bringing forward a resolution on May 12th wherein she
The Honourable
stated
Minister's time is up.
clinics don't.
The Honourable Member for Point Douglas on a final supplementary question.
Researchers, advocates, and folks with lived experiences have long called for safe consumption sites because they know that they save lives. We are the only province in Western Canada without a safe consumption site. The minister likes to reference the Virgo report. Well, Deputy Speaker, the Virgo report recommends a safe consumption site, but this government deliberately removed it from the final copy. We need safe consumption sites to support folks now. Will the minister listen to the research, follow the lead of other provinces, and commit to opening a safe consumption site today? Or does she believe, as the Premier, her boss, does, that addictions is a moral failing?
The Honourable Minister of Mental Health, Wellness and Recovery.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. The member for Point Douglas continues to increase the volume of her voice, but the information that is not being increased is the accurate information that needs to be placed on the record, and the thanks that needs to be sent out from the member to all the healthcare workers and service delivery organizations, of which there's over 40, that are working so hard during this difficult time to provide services to individuals that are struggling with addictions and substance use. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, since April of last year, over 2,268 individuals have been helped by our RAM clinics. Will the member for Point Douglas thank the healthcare workers and all the individuals that are working?
The Honourable Minister's time is up. The Honourable Member for St. Boniface.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. This government has routinely ignored warning after warning on the pandemic, and we're concerned the same is happening with the economy, because we've seen a ton of pre-pandemic legislation that was rammed through with a COVID stamp stuck on the side to justify it, but it's legislation that often undermines public institutions and won't help the vast majority of Manitobans or their businesses. Now, today's the last day to directly ask questions till October, and we don't even have a glimmer of a post-pandemic opening plan. When, if ever, will Manitobans be able to get a recovery plan from this government?
The Honourable First Minister.
Well, in due course, but of course in the immediate present we live in, we are the hotspot of COVID cases in North America, and of course we're going to continue to focus on having good enforcement. And so I want to say thank you to all of our enforcement people. We have more than 3,250 people who've helped with that, and sadly that's necessary. But I wanted to say a special thank you to all Manitobans who have followed the public health orders and continue to follow the public health orders. It's important to do that. It's important to do that to stop the spread of COVID and its variants, and so I want to say a special thank you to all the Manitobans out there that are making the sacrifice of doing the right thing and respecting those public health orders. The longer that we do that, the shorter the period of recovery will be.
The Honourable Member for St. Boniface on a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. We're very concerned because this government's track record on risk management has been a disaster. We are deeply concerned that as we face a fragile recovery, that the government is basically gambling everything on a housing bubble that many banks are projecting could burst. There's a difference between optimism and wishful thinking, and this government for a year has seemed to have based just about every decision on ignoring reality instead of coping with it. In the pandemic, good planners have set out best, worst, and expected scenarios. The failure to prepare the third wave we're enduring right now meant we had a worse than worst case scenario. But when it comes to the economy, is the government going to release a plan, and can it be reality-based for a change?
The Honourable First Minister.
What this country would have looked like if we had a lot more vaccines a lot sooner, like dozens of countries around the world, and then ask himself if that's not the sad reality of the situation we face today, and if it is, then perhaps the federal government does bear some responsibility for procuring vaccines later rather than sooner. That being said, I want to say a special thank you to the young people of this province. We have approximately 18,600 grade 12 students who will be graduating this year. And congratulations to them. This should be a moment to revere and to celebrate for them and their families. It's a moment like last year's grad that's kind of tinged by the nature of COVID. So I want to say to them, we're proud of you. You're our future. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We celebrate you for everything you've done and everything you've learned and everything you're going to do to contribute to a better world, a better Manitoba, a better planet. Thank you.
The honourable member for River Heights on a final supplementary question. The honourable member for River Heights, if you got a mute.
I'm sorry. Mr. Deputy Speaker, physical fitness and athletic activities are important to good health, especially in young people. Once hospitalizations and ICU cases are down, will the government allow full participation in fitness and athletic activity, including team sports, in communities and regions which reach a specific proportion of the population vaccinated, as for example, in communities with 80% of Manitobans 12 years of age or older having had at least one of their vaccine doses? And will the government also use rapid testing, as Utah has shown works, to keep team sports safe? I table a copy of the Utah studies.
The Honourable Deputy Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I know that public health, led by Dr. Rusin, has often indicated that whether it's schools, which he believes should be the last things to close and the first things to open, or youth activity is extremely, extremely important, and they've done everything they can during this pandemic to keep those opportunities going for youth. But we also know that there's been a disruption, and that has been hard on young people. We hear that from many young people. So I do know that in the planning for reopening, and we all hope that can be sooner than later. We have a fight right now when it comes to the third wave, but when we look at reopening, that is one of the priorities that public health has placed in ensuring that young people can have that activity that they so desire and that they so need for their physical and mental health, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
The honourable member for McPhillips.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the leadership of the Manitoba Teachers Society wrote an opinion editorial in the Winnipeg Free Press stating partisan politics do not belong in the classroom. Our government agrees with this statement. However, we are seeing MTS do the exact opposite. Can the minister shed light on recent activities in the classroom with the chamber? Thank you.
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Clearly, opposition parties have lost their moral compass when it comes to partisan political classroom visits. We see from the Manitoba MTS president, I quote, "Our province's teachers needs many things in the classrooms, but partisan politics isn't one of them," end quote. We know MTS is now affiliated with the Manitoba Federation of Labour. Manitoba Federation of Labour is affiliated with the NDP. Manitoba Federation policy says that affiliate unions members are encouraged to take out personal memberships. I table supporting documents. Mr. Deputy Speaker, does the NDP believe that teachers should be asked to purchase political memberships?
The honourable member for Transcona.
Well, thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I wish I had time to respond to that, but I got to get to this very important question here. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the extreme centralization and control spelled out in Bill 64 means a less responsive school system. The Truth and Reconciliation's call to action were released 5 years ago. It called for the establishment of senior Indigenous educational leadership at the assistant deputy level or above. That hasn't happened. It likewise calls for denominational schools to foster an understanding of other cultures and religions, including Aboriginal spiritual beliefs. This too is not accomplished. It's time for action, and action now. When will the minister implement the TRC's calls to action for schools in Manitoba?
The Honourable First Minister.
Continue to implement the recommendations of the Missing and Murdered Inquiry and previous reports done by informed individuals of RCAP and of the TRC. Will continue to focus on implementing these and making what wasn't happening happen. A recovery, a real healing, a real reconciliation. I want to say a special thank you to all of our government employees throughout government service, the Crown corporations, the so-called must sector. This has been a challenging and difficult time for all of us, for our families, and for the work environment in particular. And so I think it would be wise for all of us to say a thank you and an appreciative word to them. I also want to say a special thank you to all our staff here. We know that this has been a challenging time for you as well, and for your families. The sacrifices you've made do not go unnoticed. We say thank you. We appreciate the opportunity to work here. You create an opportunity for us to do so. And I also, to all my colleagues in the Legislative Assembly, wish you the best. As we depart, I know the work will continue, and I look forward to seeing you again, hopefully in an assembly where we can all gather together safely in the early part of October.
Time for our questions has expired, and I have a statement for the House. As adjournment for the summer is today, I would encourage that members of the chamber remove all contents of the desk now. I would further encourage members to recycle as much as material as possible. The blue bins are in the chamber are designated in the recycling of the Hansard only. The other materials could be, like the recycle, may be placed in the large recycling containers in the message rooms located outside the chamber. And since I'm up here already, I just had the greatest time of my political career actually being in this chair. There's been some trial and tribulations, but I actually got through, and I just want to thank all the members. I want to thank the clerk staff and the legislative staff and all the pages for making this opportunity for me one of the best I've had in this chamber, and I want to thank the speaker to give me the opportunity to do this in the last 6 weeks. And like I said, this was great, and you guys were all been good to me, and I really appreciate everybody. And I just want to wish everybody a great summer. Have the time with your constituents, and be there for your families, and all stay safe. Thank you very much. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
On a point of order.
On a point of order.
Thanks. I have to say, Mr. Deputy Speaker, it's very heartwarming to hear you share those words, and I think there's nothing partisan about your service, and so there's nothing partisan about me saying this. It's been a pleasure having you in the chair, and you've certainly answered the call of duty by doing a great job. And of course, we expect the Speaker to return, and we wish her well, but of course, real pat on the back to you for your service here. Want to thank also the sergeants at arms, the clerk, the legislative staff, the page, Hansard, translation, everybody for doing an amazing job. It's been a session to remember so far, and the session isn't even done yet, so how about that? But I do hope that everyone gets an opportunity to enjoy the summer once it's safe for us to do so. And once again, just want to pass on our thanks on behalf of our team.
The Honourable Government House Leader on the same point of order.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I don't think it's a point of order, but I do think it's a good point that the member opposite raises, and I would echo my comments to you as I echoed before. And you mentioned to me during the Royal Assent ceremony, after the long list of bills was done, you said to me that you couldn't have imagined doing what you're doing in high school, but I think your high school class, which was only, I'm sure, a few years ago, would be very, very proud of the efforts that you put in here acting as our speaker. And you know, it's hard to believe that it was a little bit more than a year ago when we shut this place down because we had no idea how we would function in the way that we were being asked to function. And since then, it is remarkable to see the changes in this assembly. Of course, the few number of members and the number who are joining us virtually. And that has been very important because it allows the voices of constituents to come into this place. There was a time for a while where MLAs couldn't. They could listen, they could be online, but they couldn't actually voice the concerns or views of their constituents, and that's not how an assembly or democracy is supposed to function. So thank you to all the clerk staff, all the assembly staff, our pages, everyone who made this function in the way that it did. We certainly hope that in the fall we can all be here as 57. It would be a little strange, but I think it would also be a welcome thing to all come back together. So we wish you all a safe summer, everyone, and thank you for your great and dedicated service to this assembly, to the democracy of Manitoba, and to the people of Manitoba. They all appreciate it. Thank you.
I guess this really wasn't a point of order, but thank you for the kind words. And a couple of people I need to also remind myself to remember here is I want to thank my my co-chairs, the honourable member for Brandon East and the honourable member for La Riviere for helping me out here. They were great assistance to me, and we worked as a great team, and so I want to thank them too, especially too. Yeah. The honourable member for River Heights.
want to follow up and personally and on behalf of our team congratulate you as Deputy Speaker. You've done an admirable job and with a good sense of humor, and we certainly appreciate that. I also want to thank the Clerk's Office and the Assembly staff and the Chamber staff for everything that's been done to make this session, which combines real, in-person, and virtual people, MLAs, who are working hard to do their best for the province of Manitoba. It's been quite an experience and quite a session, and we owe a lot to all those in the Assembly staff who made it possible. Thank you.
Again, I want to thank everybody for the kind words, and it wasn't a point of order, but we'll move on to petitions. And the honourable member for Union Station. Oh, okay. The honourable member for River Heights, you might as well continue.
Yes, I wish to present the following petition to the Legislative Assembly of Manitoba. The background to the petition is as follows. Many individuals have faced challenges in obtaining and affording period necessities. In Manitoba, women, non-binary individuals, and trans people have been denied free access to essential period necessities such as pads, tampons, menstrual cups, and reusable options. The lack of free access to period items results in the perpetuation of poverty and deprives individuals of reasonable access to a basic health necessity. This petition aims to ensure that these items are free to access in public schools and within Manitoba's healthcare system, and that no individual who requests them can be denied on the basis of gender or sex identity. We petition the Legislative Assembly of Manitoba as follows: to urge the Minister of Health and Seniors Care to implement free access to period necessities within public schools and Manitoba's healthcare system, to urge the Minister of Health and Seniors Care to acknowledge the prevalence of people within Manitoba who are unable to afford essential period items, signed by Michaela Carlson, Debbie Martiniuk, Krista Marjorie Regway, and many, many others.
In accordance with Rule number 133, bracket 6, when petitions are read, they are deemed to be received by the House. The honourable member for Elmwood.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I wish to present the following petition to the Legislative Assembly. The background for this petition is as follows. Number 1, Manitoba consumers believe products should last longer, be repaired when broken, and that planned obsolescence has environmental consequences that threatens a sustainable future. Number 2, in 2021, the European Union set minimum design requirements for many electronic devices with new right to repair legislation. Number 3, the right to repair enables consumers access to the resources necessary to fix and modify their products, appliances, including cell phones, washing machines, and refrigerators. Number 4, the right to repair also allows consumers and electronic repair businesses access to the most recent versions of repair manuals, replacement parts, software, and other tools that manufacturer uses for diagnosing, maintaining, or repairing its branded electronic products. Number 5, the right to repair further allows consumers to reset an electronic security function of its branded electronic products if the function is disabled during diagnosis, maintenance, or repair. Number 6, in addition, the right to repair ensures manufacturers replace electronic products at no cost or refund the amount paid by the consumer to purchase the electronic product where they refuse or are unable to provide manuals or replacement parts. We petition the Legislative Assembly of Manitoba as follows: to urge the provincial government to adopt right to repair legislation requiring manufacturers of electronic devices and appliances, including washing machines and fridges, to make information, parts, and tools necessary for repairs available to consumers at independent repair shops. And this petition is signed by many Manitobans.
Any further petitions, grievances, orders of the day, government business? The Honourable Government House Leader.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Could you please canvass the House for leave to alter the estimate sequence for today only so that in room 254 the section of Executive Council will be replaced by enabling appropriations followed by finance.
Is there leave to alter the estimate sequence for today only so that in room 254 section Executive Council will be replaced by enabling appropriations followed by finance? Is there leave? Agreed. Leave has been granted. The Honorable Government House Leader.
And then for the last time this spring, could you please resolve into Committee of Supply?
As stated by the Government House Leader, we're going to resolve into the Committee of Supply. Mr. Deputy Speaker, please take the chair. I see the minister. Are you ready?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Oh, I see that you took your mic, the mute off your mic. Are you ready to go?
Absolutely. I would assume I can't see Adrian or anybody else on, but I assume they're there.
Yeah, Adrian's there too. Yeah.
Okay.
So, the honor member for St. James, I should say. Yeah, we haven't started yet officially. Okay, is everybody ready then?
Let's go.
Okay, let's go. Will the Committee of Supply please come to order? This section of the Committee of Supply will now resume consideration for the estimates for the Department of Crown Services. As previously agreed, questioning for the department will proceed in a global manner. The floor is now open for questions. The honourable member for St. James.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Good to be back. Yesterday when we left off, the minister was midstream offering a response to a question that I'd asked. So maybe I'll just restate the question and let us just start back there. The question that I'd asked the minister was regarding the hydro 20-year strategy. And the strategy, as I'd mentioned yesterday, seems to speak to a language or uses a language of decentralization and points to a future for hydro that is an unbundled future where distribution, transmission, and generation are all broken apart. And so what I was hoping for yesterday was some commentary from the minister about whether or not he and his government support that view of hydro's future.
The honourable minister.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and again, welcome back to day 4 of Crown's Estimates. And again, always good to be back and share some time with you, Mr. Chair, and of course the clerk's office as well, and the member from St. James. And my team, of course, without saying, is always great to be with them during this process as well. So to the member's question, certainly we talked about over the last 4 days in particular about new and emerging energy coming to Manitoba and to actually to North America, to the world. when it comes to geothermal, solar, wind power. We talked about that, and hydrogen, of course, we talked a lot about too. And certainly in the 20-year plan, hydro would be moving forward to ensure they're managing the emergence of these new technologies and new power supply sources, clean energy as well, in a way that protects obviously Manitobans and ensures that they're preparing for these new emerging sources of electricity coming to the province. So certainly government is there. We're continuing to consult with Manitoba Hydro as they go through their process. 20-year strategy is a great strategy to plan for. It could be 20 years is a long way out, but it's amazing how quickly it goes. I know we were talking just before we got on about how long we've been dealing with this pandemic, and 14, 15 months is it seems like just yesterday, but it's been a long time. So certainly we encourage Manitoba Hydro to continue down that road, and good for them, being proactive and ensuring that they're protecting Manitobans' interests on a go-forward basis.
The honourable member for St. James.
I guess the major concern with the strategy and what I was referencing is that it seems as though the Manitoba Hydro 20-year strategy references a future where hydro is no longer a vertically integrated monopoly that serves Manitobans in a way that ensures that we have the greatest reliability and the lowest cost. So that actual strategy document says the word decentralization. It speaks to a breaking apart of hydro. Can the minister provide any commentary on whether or not his government supports that aspect of what the strategy seems to outline?
The honourable minister.
Sorry about that. I thought I clicked the wrong button. Can you hear me now?
You heard me. Okay. The honourable minister.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. And thank you, Mr. Chair. And certainly, the member from St. James, talks about and agrees that there are obviously new entrants that will be coming to Manitoba, and like solar and wind that have been here, but other areas as well. So, currently we have even individual operations. I know, for instance, my colony, the Hutterite colony in my riding, that partnered with Manitoba Hydro on their solar project when that opportunity was there, and it was a really good initiative for them Certainly it was a partnership between them and Manitoba Hydro, where these entrants, of course, and these folks that are essentially working to essentially behind the meter for their own power, they know that they're not always going to have a supply of power on a go-forward basis. So to the member's point, Manitoba Hydro is protecting again on the long game to ensure that Manitoba Hydro is sustainable as they go forward. And again, that's the key, and that will continue to be the key to keep Manitoba Hydro healthy and strong for generations to come. So this isn't new, but kudos to Manitoba Hydro for really having an eye on what's coming down the road and incorporating this plan into their 20-year strategy to then ensure that, again, they're plugged in, pardon the pun, as they go forward with these new entrants coming to market and how they'll play a role. Certainly, I believe anyways, based on what's happened the last few years, these are smaller commercial outfits that are coming in that perhaps are looking at new technology. And certainly Manitoba Hydro, being a good partner, obviously wanting to grow the economy too as well, are continuing to have eyes on that over the next 15 to 20 years. So good for them. And I think the member from St. James would agree that that's good business, and certainly protecting Manitoba Hydro is the right thing to do for Manitobans.
The honourable member for St. James.
The strategy document also suggests that there may be a potential use of surge pricing in the future. We know what happened with the use of surge pricing in Texas. We all saw that what happened only a matter of months ago. Does the minister and his government support what's identified in the 20-year hydro strategic document, this suggestion that we will be potentially looking at surge pricing in Manitoba?
The honourable minister.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and certainly comparing Texas to Manitoba Hydro probably isn't really an apples to apples comparison, but of course, we know that there is no direct mention of actually surge pricing. As a matter of fact, there's no reference, but also that's something that I think that Manitoba Hydro would be protecting Manitobans on as they go forward, because the bottom line is to keep Manitoba Hydro strong and publicly owned by Manitobans, and that's exactly what they're going to be doing, knowing and full well that emergence of new energy are coming. They're here already. They're already dealing with it, but they know that there's going to be a growing requirement for it. So again, I don't know where the member is going with this. I understand that he claims that he's concerned about Manitoba Hydro being privatized, which we know is simply fear mongering. And I wish the member would get on to something that's really important to Manitobans and talk about the Wall Report and talk about how we can move forward to ensure that these type of fiascos never happen again under any government. And that's exactly what we're going to be focusing on, and we continue to focus on, is going forward to ensure that processes are in place to protect Manitobans. Proper stage gates are set up for large capital projects that will send a red flag up to ensure that we don't ever put sunk costs of $1.2 billion into a project that should never have gotten started. So with that, I hope the member's ready to move on to another line of questioning. I see the member from the Maples is on as well. I'm happy to talk about MPI and MBLL as well. There are three great crowns here that we have the pleasure of working with and working for the betterment of Manitobans, and we're looking forward to continuing discussing them today as well. And again, I thank the member from St. James for asking those questions, and I really appreciate the time we've had. And if he wants to continue, I'm ready to go. So thank you again, and certainly we're looking for the betterment of all Manitobans.
The honourable member for St. James.
I would like to ensure that it's made clear that I think Manitobans do care deeply about the future of hydro and the potential unbundling and the separation into various components, as has happened in jurisdictions like Texas. And the strategic document does explicitly reference time of use pricing, but I will not pursue that any further. I'm going to ask one more question relating to hydro before ceding it to my colleague from the Maples. Is the minister aware of any proposals for small modular reactors here in Manitoba?
The honourable minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank the member from St. James for that question. And again, that just leads into exactly what we've been talking about, is the emergence of new technology that are coming to Manitoba. And as a matter of fact, I do believe the member and I talked about this when we talked about his idea with the that he floated to us on hydrogen. And we had a great conversation about that, and I could be mistaken, but certainly I'll remind the member and Manitobans on the call today or on the line today that again, there's new technology coming, and as a matter of fact, SMRs are on the horizon, and we know there's a lot of interest growing right across Canada. Other jurisdictions have signed MOUs with other firms, and I'm looking forward to continuing to grow that. And I know that Manitoba is open for business, and certainly if anybody wants to set up a business here in Manitoba, whether it be in the SMR field or the agriculture field, or you name it, we're open for business, and certainly we're more than willing to take the time and do the work to ensure that Manitobans are the benefits and the benefactors of new technology and new investments coming right here to Manitoba.
The honourable member for Burroughs. The Maples.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to thank the Ledge Clerk, Ledge staff, and IT. This is making possible us to meet virtually. You know, it's even though we all want to be in person in the Ledge, but this is the safest way we can do it at this moment. And I also like to thank Minister and his staff making available for today. And also, you know what, whenever I had any question or emails, returning those emails on a timely manner is really appreciated. Thank you. And I'll probably just go into the question from there. Could the minister update the committee on whether he anticipates MPI will also see a profit this year again due to the pandemic? If yes, how much?
The Honourable Minister.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I would like to also welcome the member from the Maples to the conversation, and again, like to thank him as well for his ability to communicate in a fashion that unfortunately is devoid of some of his colleagues, but certainly he does a wonderful job, and I'm more than happy, and I continue to be more than happy to make myself and my staff available for all members of the opposition when they have a question or a concern, particularly surrounding a constituent issue. And we're, of course, that's what we do. That's what we're elected to do, and we'll continue to do that in a very nonpartisan way to ensure Manitobans are protected. So thank you to the member from Maples for those comments, and I appreciate the work he does for his constituents too. On a go forward, this year, 21-22, Manitoba Public Insurance, and these documents are public, their reports are public, so certainly they are available to Manitobans and the opposition as well. They're looking at 21-22 of a profit of $61 million, and to that too as well, it would be a great opportunity just to put again on the record the work that the board and the executive have done during these very difficult times with COVID and the pandemic over the last several months, and in turn recognizing that not as many vehicles were on the road during that time with the of course work from home, and certainly some of the restrictions that we've all been living through the last several months, has also provided the corporation with excess funds on their basic side line as well, and certainly pleased that they were able to provide Manitobans during these difficult times over in excess of $200 million in rebates to get back on the kitchen tables to help families get through these tough times. So with that rather long-winded response, Mr. Chair, again, I thank the member from the Maples, and I look forward to his next question.
The Honourable Member for the Maples.
When I see the minister said that there's a profit of $61 million, I'm just wondering, why are we asking for a base freeze for the employees?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I thank the member from the Maples for that question. And certainly, members know, and Manitobans know, and business owners know, if you don't make money and show a profit, chances are you're not going to be around for a long time. So it's very obviously very good news that the Crown Corporation, particularly MPI, is able to do that. There are so many fluctuations in their business, as the member knows, being the critic. He knows that one hailstorm can erode about $150 million in profit in a matter of an overnight thunderstorm. So certainly what's face value can erode very quickly, and businesses have to protect themselves for those devastating and catastrophic events. They happen every day across the world, and we're not devoid of it here in Manitoba, and we know that when it comes to serious storms, and we're entering the storm season as they are calling for a risk of a thunderstorm tonight. But again, certainly it's great that they have that we'll call it that rainy day fund available if they do need it in their profit margin. So, and certainly we talked about this with the colleague from St. James as well, the member from St. James, with respect to mandates. Government sets mandates, and certainly our government has done it. Other governments have done it. The NDP have done it for years as well, and that's what governments do. And then the negotiations and the bargaining begins between the employer and the employee. And certainly we know that negotiations have gone on in our crowns. We know IBEW was on strike for 60 days, and now they've gone to conciliation through the Labor Board. So that's the process. We respect it, and we'll continue to respect the same process in MPI and MBLL, for that matter, as they go through and work with their employees to ensure that they can bargain in good faith without government interference. And that's exactly what we'll do, is ensure that we are not involved other than setting the mandate, and that's what we'll continue to do with MPI.
The honourable member for the Maples.
Could the minister tell us if any layoffs have taken place at MPI since last June due to the pandemic?
Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, I thank the member for that question. And again, I will answer the question. But before I do that, I just wanted to go through again quickly with the supports that Manitoba Public Insurance have provided during these difficult times during COVID. Unprecedented contributions and support for Manitobans. And I just want to get a few of them on the record, Mr. Chair, and certainly thank you for indulging me, including turning over multiple service centers to support Manitoba's COVID-19 testing efforts. We know that early on there was a lack of the ability to have space to do drive-through testing, and Manitoba Public Insurance stepped up. They were well positioned, and their infrastructure was well aligned with the needs of public health in order to provide testing, drive-through testing, and that's exactly what they did, which was wonderful. As a matter of fact, we still have a center in service today as well. And also in respect to offering international registration plan relief is a form of extended renewal period. So what they did was the IRP, which is due annually to the large and small trucking organizations, they actually put in some relief and extended the payment and helped them mitigate their cash flow concerns as they went through the tough 6 months in the industry, especially in the beginning of the pandemic. Also temporarily suspended insurance cancellation notices and collection processes to all Manitobans. So great stuff provided by Manitoba Public Insurance. And let's not discount the human factor. Almost redeployed over 70 staff to support provincial responses, including vaccine and contact tracing efforts. So really good support, unprecedented support from Manitoba Public Insurance. And we're happy to also to provide an answer on the question from the member from the Maples, and that would be a resounding no.
The honourable member for the Maples.
When does the minister accept that claim dispute tribunal to be up and running? The Bill 15, the one we just recently passed.
The Honourable Minister.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and again, thank the member from Maples for the question. As the member knows, the bill received royal assent on May 20th. So just received royal assent, which is good news. Again, now it's subject to the 45-day consultation process, which is a public process. Manitobans now have 45 days to weigh in on the tribunal, and certainly as we go forward, all of Manitobans' input is going to be factored into how MPI will eventually move forward to establishing the independent tribunal, along with the help from Manitobans, because that's who asked for the independent tribunal, and that's who is going to be directly involved.
The Honourable Member for the Maples.
So after 45 days, what do you think, how long it's going to take after 45 days? So is there any timeline on this, or there's no timeline?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and again, thank you to the member from the Maples for that question. And certainly, the process will continue to evolve now that royal assent has been given. Also, again, as I mentioned, the 45-day public consultation. So we know for sure that we're talking, likely after the 45 days, there'll be other processes. But what I will do for the member, and certainly I've done it in the past and I'll continue to, is as it winds through the process, certainly we'll keep the member informed so that certainly he is up to speed, so that if he needs to share any information with any of his constituents on when this will be up and running, we'll be more than happy to provide him with that information on a go-forward basis.
The Honourable Member for the Maples.
Thank you, Minister, on this. Please do keep me in the loop so we can share the information with Manitobans. Could the Minister comment on whether he foresees MPI entering into a new contract with the Manitoba Motor Dealer Association or ATA? I'll just go in short form, ATA.
Mr. Chair.
Honourable Minister.
Thank you so much. I'm sure you're having a discussion about the Jet game tomorrow night with Patricia, but that's okay. It's going to be a good game. Go Jets, go. Thank you. Thank the member as well for that question. ATA and MMDA, as the member knows, have been in negotiations, contractual negotiations with MPI. Certainly, we respect that process. We'll continue to, and we fully anticipate that an agreement will be reached for the betterment of all Manitobans. And certainly, if anything changes on that, I'd be more than happy to fill the member in. But we're of the mind set that the negotiations are continuing, and we hope that things come to a conclusion sooner than later.
The honourable member for the Maples.
Thank you for that, Minister. And also, is there can you share anything about what their ask is, what the MMDA and ATA's ask is? We know that Saskatchewan is paying around $92.68 per hour. Our rates are $74.43. And is there can the minister share any ask by those two MMDA and ATA?
The honourable minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And certainly, I wouldn't be privy to other than what has been obviously made public, as the member knows the rates. But I can tell the member, though, that Manitoba is the second highest in the country, next to, we'll call an outlier of Saskatchewan. Certainly, we know that negotiations are continuing in a very collaborative way as we go forward. Certainly with any negotiation, there's times where parties don't agree all the time. And certainly when it's a large Crown corporation, sometimes those issues become more public. And we really thank the members of MMDA and ATA and Manitoba Public Insurance for mitigating that process and keeping their discussions where they should be, and that's at the bargaining table when it comes to what's the best for not only the parties involved, but for Manitobans and Manitoba ratepayers. So being the second highest right now, closer to first and further from third. So certainly we're looking forward to ensuring that the Manitoba trades are back at work with a new contract very soon.
The honourable member for the Maples.
How many independent contractors has MPI entered into with individual repair shops? Like how many contracts they have assigned with individual shops?
The honourable minister.
Well, certainly, those are negotiations between MPI and the shops, and certainly we hope all of them are going to be signed up soon. But we wouldn't be privy to, nor would we be getting directly involved in those down the rabbit hole negotiations that, quite frankly, are between the two players, the three players, MMDA and MTA and MPI. One thing we'll take away from being an elected official is a lot of acronyms will be definitely thrown around for years to come, I'm sure. But and of course for the member, we wouldn't be obviously get deeply involved in those numbers at this point. But again, we're really optimistic that things are going to come to a conclusion. They've been we know that they've been talking on a regular basis, and certainly as recently as over the weekend. So that's good news that they're back at the table and they're talking. And certainly we encourage that for the betterment of Manitobans. And certainly the only disturbing part is, and I'll backtrack a bit on the royal assent of the Independent Dispute Tribunal, Bill 15. The member is advocating for it. I'm sure the member has constituents that maybe looking for another avenue other than going to the courts or going to a non-independent tribunal. But my question would be, why would the member opposite vote against Bill 15?
The honourable member for the Maples.
Maybe Minister knows on this. I have raised a couple of issues regarding to Bill 15, such as people who can't read or write. What is the solution for those people, and how come there is no appeal process? If one person made the decision, there's no appeal process, and go to the courts, you can go only up to $10,000 too. So those were the concern that I have asked the minister, I think, in the committees. So even I asked minister to see if he want to have amendment done on those one. He said no. So I'll just go to my next question. We have seen the reports, I think it was provided by actually MPI in the media that there's a certain number of SOFs who has signed individual contract. Can the minister share those numbers that MPI, even though it was in the media, or a minister can maybe undertake to provide those lists to us, how many people have signed individual contract?
The Honourable Minister.
Certainly would appreciate, the member said that he'd picked up something in the media. If he could provide us with that information, would be helpful for us, because certainly we would be more than happy to do a fact check if it's appropriate. But again, we wouldn't deal into to the negotiations on who's signed, who hasn't signed. Those kind of dealings. That's between MPI and the trades, and certainly the member would respect that. I know that we do as a government, and I would suspect that the member from the Maples would respect that process as well. So if the member has that information, whether it be an article in the local paper or somewhere else, please, happy to get a copy over to us, and certainly we'll fact check if appropriate.
The honourable member for the Maples.
Maybe I will provide that information. I think it was in the news. I have to go through and look. Maybe I'll communicate with the minister's staff through the email on this. Could the minister provide the committee with a general update on how things generally with the project NOVA is progressing?
The honourable minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and certainly thank the member again from the Maples. Now, Project Nova, again, is at the very early, the first steps of a multi-year project to bring MPI into, I guess, actually to bring it into line with other publicly owned insurance companies with respect to their ability to provide online services for Manitobans. Certainly, these are areas that should have been done years ago, but we certainly commend the leadership of Manitoba Public Insurance and, again, support of our government to move forward to, again, provide a better, stronger and more relevant service for Manitoba ratepayers on a go-forward basis. You know, the online services is important, but also getting out of manual spreadsheets. Can you believe, Mr. Chair, and maybe the member from the Maples didn't know this either, but MPI was still using manual spreadsheets, you know, essentially to do some calculations. So we know that that's probably gone by the way of the dodo bird a few years ago. So again, early stages. The member, I'm sure, will be along for the ride, at least for the next 2 years, again, until the next election cycle. But if we're still here at the table and in this multi-year project, we'll be more than happy to continue to update the member from the Maples as it goes forward.
The honourable member for the Maples.
I'm gonna actually give back the floor to a member from St. James. He have a quick question for the minister.
The honourable member for St. James.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, and I appreciate the willingness to be flexible on the part of the minister, so thank you for this. Just had an important question that we wanted to ensure we got on the record today. Can the minister explain or help us understand what the impacts of Bill 40 will be in terms of revenues for MBLL?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and again, always want to ensure that we're providing information to members from the opposition on a regular basis, and we're very flexible, and we've proven to be that way, and I appreciate the comments from the member from St. James. We will continue to be. As the member knows, his party, bite my tongue, his party held Bill 40 until the fall session. We know that Bill 40 is part of our mandate in Crown Services to provide more choice, more convenience, and lower pricing for Manitoba consumers. And certainly as we go forward over the fall session, we're looking forward to engaging more and more on those discussions with Manitobans, but certainly delaying the bill will delay all the processes that are surrounding that particular bill. And again, we'll look forward to bringing this back to the discussion table in the early fall.
I guess the honourable member for the Maples.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could the minister tell the committee when online services, especially for those offered by brokers, will begin to be online?
The Honourable Minister.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, the ask from the member from the Maples is about the online services. And again, that's tied to Project Nova, which is a multi-year project. And as I mentioned in another previous answer, but certainly the upgrades that we also talked about will ensure service improvements for customers in service delivery and partners alike. So again, we look forward to continuing again to work with MPI, of course, through this process with brokers, and really this is a real collaborative effort in the sense that Project Nova, with Project Nova, a broker liaison working group was established. So this working group will involve again our brokers, MPI, to ensure that the offerings are much superior than what we've been accustomed to. And again, Project Nova will steer that ship. And again, certainly the outcome of that likely in a multi-year, the online is important. Obviously a good first step, and probably would probably have a window of anywhere from maybe 2 to 3 years by the time it's working and through Project Nova. As I say, it's a multi-year project in Project Nova. So just to give you, the member from the Maples, some window of, with respect to window in, or look into a window with respect to online services improving, I think that's a fair assessment.
The Honourable Member for the Maples.
I'm sure probably Minister gets the update on this, like what stage are they at right now? I know it's a multi-year. Are we at completed 25%, 50%, 100%? And just want to know if Minister have a quick timeline, what percentage is completed or anything like that.
The Honourable Minister.
Well, thanks, Mr. Chair. And again, I just mentioned that the window is 2 to 3 years probably, because the project is a multi-year project. But that is information that certainly the member, what I just provided to, it's not 100%, it's not 75, it's not 50, it's not 25. Again, we're in the early stages of implementing Project Nova. MPI is, and certainly again, lots of work to do, but internet and this working group that was established with MPI through Project Nova with the brokers is a great step in order to ensure that Manitobans are going to be provided a service that, bar none, will be one of the best in Canada.
Honourable Member for the Maples.
Does the Minister have a breakdown of how the new contract will affect customer rate for the next 5 years?
The Honourable Minister.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and again, thank the member from the Maples for that question. And certainly information in the contracts that were signed between the brokers and MPI is information that is obviously not public. I mean, that we know that the false narrative that the members from the members of the opposition put on the record of a loss of 23 million was clearly false information. And I don't know where, unless they're picking up a local paper and reading it in there, we know that, and it was very clear that the hard work done by the brokers and the conciliation process, the conciliator and MPI and their team, the board, and the executive worked hard to ensure that Manitobans were also the benefactors of a multi-year contract with our brokers. Brokers play an integral role. Brokers are going to be around for a long time, and they are really the front lines
of MPI, an extension of, and certainly that's an asset that pays dividends to Manitoba ratepayers when they want to insure their vehicle, or in turn maybe purchase other insurance through their broker. That's great. And in saving over $20 million in 5 years is wonderful, because that also helps keeps rates low for Manitobans. And certainly we're proud of the teams for ensuring that Manitoba ratepayers were protected during this process.
Member for the Maples.
I just heard the minister said $20 million saving. Can the minister undertake to provide that information to us, where that $20 million saving ministry is talking about? And also $23 million extra per 5 years. It is in the news, so the minister looks like he's saying that's a fake news, as is being, we have heard so much in south of us, fake news. So is the minister saying that all was fake news? Well, I'll also ask the next question maybe. Could the minister provide the final total cost paid to, I'll probably announce the last name wrong, Doug Finken-Wiener, for facilitating a conciliation?
Honourable Minister.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and you know, the member from the Maples mentions fake news. Well, you know, again, certainly we'll certainly take information that's provided by MPI and the brokers as factual over what a local paper would write, and also the fact that one of the local unions misrepresented the outcomes of the negotiations. So, you know, I would certainly, and I hope the member would agree that if they're looking for facts, they should actually go to the source. And that source is, again, sourced through MPI and the brokers. And they were very clear. MPI estimates that essentially approximately $20 million in savings to ratepayers over the term of the agreement will be recognized. So does the member have an issue with MPI and their management and their board and their executive? I would hope not, but it sounds like that the member from the Maples is more trusting of the local media and the union, MGU in this case, than he is the actual corporation, the Crown Corporation and MPI. Certainly, that doesn't send a good message to the hardworking folks at MPI that have gone through the most difficult time in history. And certainly, I would expect the member would either retract those comments and apologize for throwing under the bus MPI board, MPI executive, and brokers of Manitoba when he's relying on a single source like a local newspaper.
The honourable member for the Maples.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I am directly coming to the source now. Source is a minister right now. I'm asking to see if he will undertake to provide that $20 million saving, where it is coming from. This is like directly the source. So this is on the top where I'm going right now. I'm not going to the newspaper, or I'm not going to anywhere other, as minister is saying, and newspapers are fake news. So I'm just coming directly to the source. And also, could the minister undertake to provide a copy of conciliatory report to the committee so we all can read it to see what is in there? This is the information, Manitobans information, and it's between IBAM and MPI. So ratepayers, Manitobans have the right to know what is in that report.
The honourable minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, just be able to put some facts on the record again for the member. The IBAM and MPI successfully negotiated an agreement, a 5-year agreement, saving Manitobans roughly $20 million to ratepayers of Manitoba Public Insurance. So again, they reached an agreement. We thank the conciliator for their time, and there is no report other than the fact that MPI and IBAM, again, MPI has reported that there'll be approximately $20 million in savings to the ratepayers of Manitoba over the term of the agreement. So I hope the member now accepts that. I provided him the information that he's asked for. MPI has provided the information that he is looking for. And now we can move on to another line of questioning.
The honourable member for the Maples.
Does the minister plan on publicly releasing the conciliatory report?
The honourable minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There is no report.
The honourable member for the Maples.
So we hired a conciliator to have the report made for MPI or a contract they were negotiating. Is the minister going to release that report to the rightful owners, the ratepayers, the Manitobans? I'm sure they have the right to know what was discussed, how much money is going to the IBAM from MPI. They have the right to know.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, I'll see if we can help the member from the Maples, and of course, recognizing that the member is fairly new to this House, and certainly again, I appreciate working with the member, and I continue to work with the member and certainly provide information when asked on a timely basis, and there's no difference here. We know that in particular, the minister, myself, issued a directive to have a conciliator essentially work with the parties to negotiate an agreement. And that's exactly what happened. The agreement was negotiated, and the conciliator, essentially, his job was done. There's no report. He did exactly what he was hired to do. And the directive was given to Manitoba Public Insurance and IBAM to deal with the conciliator, to negotiate an agreement. That's what they did. It's been reported, and all the information is public and published publicly. So if the member wants, he can certainly find all the information related to the outcome of the agreement that was negotiated between IBAM and MPI online, anytime. Same as the rest of Manitobans.
The honourable member for the Maples.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also asked the Minister a question earlier. How much is, I'll say the first name only, Doug Finkenwiener, is like, how much is the cost to the ratepayers? How much is the total reconciliation process cost? And if a minister can provide those cost to Manitobans. And I'll probably also move to the next question because there's quite a few questions. There's not much time left. MPI has recently moved their auto auction to be online. Could the minister tell the committee how much the Crown Corporation anticipate in saving as a result of this?
The Honourable Minister.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I apologize for the delay getting back to the member from the Maples. And I know there were multiple FIPA requests on the contract with Mr. Finkbinder, the conciliator, and certainly we want to make sure that number is accurate. So we'll endeavor to get that number for the member with respect to the cost of the conciliation. And we know MPI will continue to monitor the new online auction, auto auction online as they move forward. And certainly we look forward to, as Manitobans will look forward to, recognizing and seeing the savings as they continue to report publicly to Manitobans.
A member for the Maples.
Was this contract tendered?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just again, is the member asking about the conciliator, Mr. Finkbinder? Just wanted to be clear.
Member for the Maples.
This is about auto auction.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and actually do have some information on the conciliator. The cost was $218,000. So the member from the Maples, I did get that information. And how's that for timely? Quick, really quick. And certainly under the question regarding the auto auction, certainly we'll take that under advisement and report back.
The Honourable Member for the Maples.
Sorry, I muted. Okay. Impact Auto Auction appear to be offering the services. Could the minister tell us how much they have been contracted for?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I thank the member again. Again, I mentioned that we're going to take this under advisement and certainly endeavor to get the question answered for the member.
The Honourable Member for the Maples.
Could the minister tell the committee if Impact is an American-owned company?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and again, certainly, the member has some questions about this auto auction online. We'll certainly, again, as I said, we would look into this matter and get back to him. So, if he has any other further line of questioning with respect to auto auction, certainly just maybe in the matter of trying to get some time and ensuring the member has an opportunity to ask other questions. Certainly, again, we'll endeavor, if he would like to get us that information that he's looking for with respect to auto auction, we'll certainly endeavor to get him the answers.
The Honourable Member for the Maples.
So Ministry is taking under advisement to tell us if this company is an American company and all the other details that we have asked earlier.
The Honourable Minister.
Exactly, we're going to get the details as the member has asked, and we will look into it.
The honourable member for the Maples.
Does Impact Auto has any offices in Manitoba? Or our minister can take this also under advisement?
The honourable minister.
Correct.
The honourable member for the Maples.
I'm gonna pass the floor over to my friend from Tyndall Park for the next 15 minutes. After that, member from St. James will be taking over.
The honourable member for Tyndall Park.
Okay, I thank you, colleague from Maples, for allowing me 15 minutes here just to ask some questions. And just before I get started, I too just wanted to sort of recognize and pay a big thank you for how grateful I'm feeling along with my colleagues, I'm sure, for all of the clerks and everyone who has been making it so the Legislative Assembly can function the way it has been throughout the entire pandemic, sort of creating the opportunities for us to be able to work safely from our offices and from our homes, and just always ensuring that we have felt safe when we come into the legislature, when we're working from home. So just a big thank you for creating that for us. I want to get started. I want to sort of take a different line of questioning, and then I will fall into some hydro and MPI. But the first question and topic that I wanted to touch on were taxi drivers. We've heard a little bit about taxi cab owners throughout the pandemic, but we haven't heard anything about programs for taxi cab drivers. And we know that our taxi cab drivers have worked nonstop throughout the pandemic. They have been risking their own health, their own safety throughout the pandemic. And to this very day, every single day, they're driving people, they're enabling people to go and get vaccinated. So my question for the minister is, up until this point, there hasn't been any recognition or any form of compensation for taxi cab drivers. Is the minister planning to formally acknowledge, recognize, or compensate in any sort of way?
As the minister is going to be getting his answer, the clerks at the desk just said that they appreciate your acknowledgement for the member from Tyndall Park. The honourable minister.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome the member from Tyndall Park. Great to have the opportunity to work with the member as well, and have a discussion today on Crown corporations, and appreciate the work that the member does for her constituents in the Tyndall Park area. Again, that was a newer area from similar to me. We got kind of moved over a little bit, and so we had the opportunity, and I always look at that as an opportunity as well, because we have an opportunity to meet new people and expand our relationships with our constituents in a whole new riding, which provides diversity and different relationships and cultures. So I'm sure the member is experiencing that and continues to, and I know the member serves her constituents very well. So and I appreciate the work she does in the legislature every day and through these difficult COVID times. So the member asked about taxi cab drivers. Certainly, we know, and I don't want to speak for the member, the Minister of Finance, but we know that we have some of the most generous programs available for Manitobans in Canada. We're very proud of that, and we'll continue to support Manitobans. And in particular, in MPI's support, again, providing over $180 million in rebates. We know that those rebates were applicable to all registered owners in Manitoba. So we know our friends, our cab drivers and rideshare companies and other ones also were able to take advantage of that rebate, and again, excess of $180 million from MPI. So certainly there's been some work done. There's always more work to do, and certainly appreciate the question from the member from Tyndall Park and the work she does.
Member for Tyndall Park.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson, and I'd like to thank the Minister for taking the time to answer some of these questions. And I was just hoping to, I suppose, have a clearer answer on that first question. I say this because people who have worked throughout the pandemic, whether it's in retail stores, grocery stores, but who have continued to work, a lot of them have been eligible for programs such as the Risk Recognition Program or for the Manitoba Bridge Grant app. But when it comes to taxi cab drivers, they haven't been eligible for any of these resources. They haven't even been acknowledged within the House, within the chambers. And so maybe this can be used as an opportunity for the Minister to properly acknowledge taxi cab drivers, or explain or consider, maybe share with us if the department is considering any formal eligibility or program for them to be able to apply to.
The Honourable Minister.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and again, I appreciate the advocacy the member from Tyndall Park is putting on the record for cab drivers and owners who have also gone through a very difficult time with reduced, obviously, traffic on the road. There's reduced, restaurants are closed and hotels are closed and other venues are closed. So definitely been a difficult time, and certainly we recognize that. And again, I appreciate the advocacy the members bring forward today. This would be something that would be best looked at through my colleague, the Minister of Finance, and certainly with her advocacy today, I'd be more than happy to obviously speak with my colleague and ensure that again we're not the bottom line is these are unprecedented times, and there is no roadmap, there is no playbook on COVID, and certainly we're not going to get it right all the time, and we're a government that listens, and we're a government that's transparent and open, and certainly appreciate her advocacy today, and certainly have those discussions.
The Honourable Member for Tyndall Park.
Okay, last question on this topic. Just would the Minister and his department be willing to meet with me virtually over the next 2 or 3 weeks just to discuss the opportunity for a program?
The Honourable Minister.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and absolutely, I welcome the member from Tyndall Park to reach out to my office. More than happy to engage in a discussion with her. I really appreciate the advocacy she's putting forward today here on the record, and certainly that's why we ran for office. That's why we put our name on a ballot, is to ensure that we take care of our constituents, we take care of Manitobans, and certainly listening is part of that. And learning is part of that, and I'd be more than happy to take a virtual meeting with the member from Tyndall Park, and I welcome her to reach out to our office, as I have with the member from Maples, and as I have with the member from St. James that is also joining us on the line today. I continue to do that. That's that's an area that I picked up in my private sector life. You know, you've got to be there. You got to be open and honest with customers and colleagues, and that's exactly what we'll continue to do. And I appreciate the member reaching out, and we'll certainly look forward to meeting with her virtually.
The honourable member for Tyndall Park.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson, and thank you, Minister, and we will follow up on that meeting. Just wondering, is the Minister considering some incentives for people who are switching over to environmentally friendly resources, such as solar panels, for example? And if so, could he elaborate on them a little bit?
The honourable minister.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and again, I thank the member from Tyndall Park for that question. And just for the record, Efficiency Manitoba, through Conservation and Climate, is now the responsible ministry when it comes to those programs. Certainly, there was a time where it fell under Crown Services, but during the reorg, the more emphasis now on that program through Efficiency Manitoba, formerly PowerSmart, would be probably best to relate those questions to my colleague member from the Minister of Conservation and Climate. I apologize for that, and certainly I'm sure that she will endeavour to help her with that question.
The honourable member for Tyndall Park.
Okay, I appreciate it. I've got about 5 more minutes left, so I'm jumping around a little bit. I'm going to jump into talking about MPI. My colleague from St. Boniface asked about this about a week ago in question period. We answer, so I was hoping the minister could help clarify this here. We're under the impression that on June 13th, hundreds of Manitoba businesses and thousands of workers could be out of work. If this happens, Manitobans will have no place to get their cars fixed because MPI canceled its agreement with over 230 Manitoba collision shops. Is this accurate?
The honourable minister.
Well, thank you, and certainly we had this discussion earlier on for the benefit of the member from Tyndall Park, and currently ATA and MMDA are in negotiations, have been in negotiations with MPI, continue to be in negotiations, and we're again not directly involved in those negotiations, unlike the former government where they stuck their nose into everything. We respect the process and we'll continue to do that. Certainly, we know that there's been some good communication over the last several days between the parties, and we respect that process, and we will again expect that there'll be a deal coming hopefully soon that's in the betterment of all Manitoba ratepayers, and again support not only our trades but also MPI as well. As we go forward, negotiations, as I mentioned earlier, are challenging. Sometimes we agree and sometimes we don't. But I can share with the member from Tyndall Park, as I did with the members earlier, that those negotiations are continuing. They are at the table, and I can assure the member that discussions are ongoing as we speak.
The honourable member for Tyndall Park.
Could the minister share with us or confirm if MPI did or did not cancel its agreement with over 230 Manitoba collision shops?
The Honourable Minister.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and we know that obviously this is, we take all these issues very seriously, and this is one of them, as I mentioned earlier in my preamble, but you know, MPI and the larger LVAA group, of course, MMDA and ATA, their contract was coming to a close. We know that negotiations were ongoing, and they were at a stalemate. So I know that the member would know that MPI exercised their ability to continue to negotiate individually with shops and shop owners, and that's what they continue to do, and they've continued to do. But also engaging the MMDA and ATA through the process. So a broad communication going forward. Certainly, we respect that process, as I mentioned earlier, and good. We feel that some good inroads have been made, and we're looking forward to hopefully having something presented soon to Manitoba ratepayers.
The honourable member for Tyndall Park.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. I'm just looking at the member from St. James. If he gives me the thumbs up, I can ask one more, or does he want me to cede the floor?
You can ask one more, Cindy. Go ahead.
Okay, I appreciate that. Different topic, just moving forward, hydro deals with Xplornet. Will the government commit to supporting made in Manitoba companies such as Clear Sky Communications and Broadband Communications North for future deals between the province and private companies to expand access to broadband? Thank you.
The Honourable Minister.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I really appreciate the question from the member from Tyndall Park. It gives me an opportunity to put some facts on the record, and certainly we know that over the last 2 decades, the speed of internet was far from the speed it needed to be, pardon the pun, but the bottom line is that for far too long, internet connectivity was piecemealed out throughout the province, and unfortunately, it didn't serve greater Manitobans. We like to call it essentially to the farm. And there were so many thousands of Manitobans that have been underserved for many years. So we recognize that. And COVID brought this to light even more so. During COVID, we realized again that more students were working from home as they are today. More families, men and women, are working from home today, and they rely on good, fast, quality internet and cell phone service. So certainly seeing this taking place and COVID really shining a light on the issue, particularly in northern and rural communities in Manitoba, we move forward with an RFQ, and all Manitoba companies, all companies related to internet supply, had the opportunity to work within the RFQ. And at that point, once they decided whether they wanted to play ball, an RFP was also put out, again providing the opportunity for all sectors to be involved in the RFP process and to bid on the broader supply of currently dark fiber supplied by Manitoba Hydro. It's been in the ground for many, many years, underutilized, and provide internet service and advanced cell service in many areas as well to Manitobans throughout the province, particularly, again, in rural and northern and First Nation communities. So exciting times coming. As we know, the Minister of Central Services made the announcement that the signing of an MOU with Xplornet, and it's going to be a very quick process. We're excited about the timeframes that Xplornet have put forward in their RFP and the MOU, stating that they'll have Manitobans connected, and the ones that are underserved served better in the very near future. As a matter of fact, within the next 2 to 3 years. So great question. I appreciate the question from the member from Tyndall Park. Certainly, I believe this answers it. There's obviously a fair and open, transparent process. And we're pleased that Xplornet was successful, of course, and moving forward with better connectivity for all Manitobans, whether you be in rural or northern communities or southern communities of Manitoba. We're looking forward to that. So with that, again, I thank the member from Tyndall Park in taking part in this process, and I look forward to seeing her again in the fall. And stay well and stay safe.
The honourable member for St. James.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No further questions.
Seeing that there's no further questions, we will now turn to the resolutions, beginning with the second resolution as we referred this consideration of the first resolution containing the minister's salary. At this point, we will now virtually members be unmuted their mics so that they can respond to the questions of each resolution. To read these. Okay. Resolution 5.2 resolved that there be granted to Her Majesty a sum not exceeding $1,170,000 for Crown Services for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2022. Shall the resolution pass?
Pass.
The resolution is accordingly passed. Resolution 5.3 resolved that there be granted to Her Majesty a sum not exceeding $1,418,715,000 for Crown Services, other reporting entities, capital investment for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2022. Shall the resolution pass?
Pass.
The resolution is accordingly passed. The last item to be considered in the estimates of the department is item number 5.1, bracket A, the minister's salary contained in resolution 5.1. The floor is open for questions. The honourable member for St. James.
I'd like to make a motion, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, the honourable member for St. James.
I'd like to motion that line item 5.1A be amended
Sorry,
so that the
you're gonna have to
minister...
say I move.
Apologies.
Yeah.
I move that line 5.1A be amended so that the Minister of Crown Services salary be reduced to $33,600.
Did you mean to say line item number 5.1, bracket A?
That's correct.
Let's get him to do it again. I'll get you to do it again, just to exactly what it's, how it's scripted. Okay, go ahead. I move.
Gladly. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I apologize for this. I move that line item 5.1, bracket A, be amended so that the Minister of Crown Services salary be reduced to $33,600.
It has been moved by the honourable member for St. James that line item 5.1A in brackets A be amended so that the Ministers of Crown Services salary be reduced to $33,600. The motion is in order. Are there any questions or comments on the motion? The honourable member for St. James? No?
Nope. No further comments.
Any other comments or questions? Is the committee ready for the question?
Question.
Shall the resolution? Shall the motion pass?
No.
No. No's. In my, all those in favor of the motion, please say yay.
Yay. Yay.
All those opposed, please say nay. Nay. Opinions, the nays have it. The motion is accordingly defeated. Now we'll go to resolutions 5.1. Resolved that there be granted to Her Majesty a sum not exceeding $662,000 for Crown Services administration for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2022. Shall the resolution pass?
Pass.
The resolution is accordingly passed. This This completes the estimates for the Department of Crown Services. The next set of estimates to be considered in this section of the Committee of Supply is for the Department of Advanced Education, Skills, and Immigration.
We have about 1 minute left.
But we have, what, 1 minute left. What is the will, should we have a recess until 5 p.m.? And then we'll.
Can we just call it 5 o'clock?
No, we can't, because we're in the chamber and we have to make sure that this goes until 5 because the other ones are going in the other committee rooms. So we have to go to 5.
Recess.
Okay, recess? Okay.
30
recess
seconds.
until 5 p.m. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it. The hour about being 5 p.m., the House, the committee rise, calling the Speaker. The hour being 5 p.m., the House is adjourned and stands adjourned until October 6th, Wednesday, October 6th, unless the Speaker calls the House to come in earlier. But for now, it's October 6th, 2021. So everybody have a great break, and we'll see everybody on October 6th.